was wrong to say. I wouldn't change a thing, 'cause in the story of our lives, the best of times through color glass. Time rolls on enough to let me move on past, but every little now and then it creeps on back to shade my smile.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be, for all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth. Welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Brian Willett, coming to you live from the deep woods of Western Georgia on this May 21st, 2024. So tonight we cover everyone's favorite subject, paranormal investigation. I know a lot of you came to this show because this is where you sort of got your feet wet with the kind of topics that we cover on Vestiges After Dark. So none of you should be a stranger to this subject matter, and we have returning guest April Norrod to come on to talk about it in the second hour, and we'll be taking your questions in the third. Should be an interesting evening. I'm sure we'll cover some areas of this that you're not terribly familiar with, so it won't be completely familiar. Don't go away. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Tuesday nights, and where we're going to cover whatever is on your mind about the paranormal. I think this is a subject that I have a lot to say on. I'm sure you can imagine, and we'll be getting to a lot of that on the second hour here, so you don't want to miss it. We have been having issues with the simulcaster, as you know, where it's been putting the wrong show title, wrong show description out on the various platforms. We think we have that fixed. According to all the reports I'm receiving, it seems like we have now resolved that. I had to do another workaround. Because there's bugs. There's a bug in the system that has not been fixed. It even updated today, in fact, brand new version of the software. It still has the bug. It's like no one ever does anything about it. So I found a workaround. It seems to be working. And the only issue we're having tonight, everything's been working like clockwork, but the only issue we're having tonight is that for some reason I cannot log into the bandwidth manager. So I can't isolate. Oh, wait, it's letting me do it now. Okay, that's perfect. See? Okay, so yes, everything's working like clockwork now. I want to be able to make sure that we isolate the bandwidth for the broadcast so that there's no latency issues that we sometimes will get, and it looks like everything is working as it should here. So yeah, we're in for a good broadcast for a change. No more problems. Anyway, I'm your host, Bishop Brian Willett, and this is my co-host, Jamie Wolf. How you doing tonight, Jamie?
Good evening, everybody. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so
should be a good subject matter tonight.
I think so, and it's like I said, it's something that everyone is fascinated by. Typically our audiences came to this show because they were interested in Ghost Adventures or something like that.
Right.
I have a lot to say on the subject. I'm not a huge advocate of paranormal investigation, but we'll get to that in the second hour. We'll talk about it, and we'll discuss, the ins and outs of it, which is what tonight's show is about. But first, let's do liturgical libations, and we've got I don't think we featured this on the show before, or if we did, it's been a long time.
I don't think so. This is a Japanese cask strength whiskey. I believe it's Kayo.
Kayo, yeah.
Kayo.
Mm-hmm.
Aged in Mizunara oak. Pardon me, must be thirsty.
Yeah, that's that wonderful Japanese oak. Just a little
One
bit for me.
thing you can definitely say about the Japanese is they do not half-ass anything.
No, they don't. Just a little bit.
And
There you go.
They
That's perfect.
perfect whatever they decide they're going to make. So
Now I've had this one straight. It's a very strong whiskey, so I like a little
I don't
drop.
remember the palate on it, so this is like starting all over for me. And
Yeah.
I did give myself a Jamie pour, didn't I?
You did. And I forgot my little dropper, so I'm just going to have to do it this way.
I'll probably need some
Want a
too.
little bit of that?
Maybe just a little drop
Go ahead.
or a big drop.
Well, I mean, you have a lot there, so, it is cask strength. And I do
Yes,
like to
it is
put a
cask
little
strength.
water in a cask strength whiskey.
53% alcohol.
Right. Well, cheers.
Oh, roast. Ooh, yeah, the water dialed it back a little bit, thank God. Because that's hot.
It's a very hot whiskey, yeah. Because I don't think I don't know what the age is on it. I don't think it has an age statement.
There's not an age statement.
Which usually means it's pretty young.
Yeah.
Typically in the whiskey
106
world,
proof. So
in the whiskey world, you want to flaunt your aged whiskeys, and if you don't put it on the bottle, it typically means that it's young, and that tastes pretty young to me. But it's good. It is good.
Second sip, much better.
Yeah, it just needs a little bit of water
That is good.
and that cask strength. Well,
is good.
You can kind of dilute it the way you like. Some people like it, weaker than that. Some people like it stronger.
Usually I use like a water cap full
I
water.
have my little dropper. I just
you
forgot
got your
it.
little fancy dropper. Me,
Well, I like to make sure that I count how many I'm putting in.
the water cap, about 3 drops.
3 drops. Okay,
Yeah,
well there you
or-
go. If it works, it works.
It works. Works in a pinch.
Yeah. I want to give a big shout out to our volunteers who
Yes.
are serving as our moderators tonight here. I already see Danielle and Val.
Val.
We got. I'm sure there's some others over there that I'm not seeing, but if I did not mention you, I want to thank you for being here with us tonight and keeping our chat safe and keeping our audience safe from the trolls who sometimes do show up out there. We're going to do something a little bit different here tonight. Another issue we've been having was the phone lines, right? Last several shows, people cannot hear us when we go live. Now, we do the tests at home and everything works out great, but as soon as we go live, nobody can hear anymore. And so I have a new phone now. This is a brand new phone. It's the iPhone 15 Pro Max. So I think that's the latest edition. And we're going to see if this corrects the issue by having Brandon call into the show. He was I thought he was in the switchboard. Go ahead and get back in there, Brandon. We're going to have him call into the switchboard. Okay, here he is, I think. And let's see if he can hear us. So, hello, Brandon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So does it sound like blotchy or is it difficult to hear?
It's a little patchy here and there, but I can hear you. You're still, I guess I can hear you through here. So yeah, you sound all right.
Okay. So on the phone, like what you're hearing on the phone sounds acceptable. Like it shouldn't be a problem for our callers.
It's patchy. Like I can hear you, but you kind of go in and out.
Okay, so it is getting patchy, but it's only when we go live. So does this sound different than when we did the test last week before we went live?
It does? Okay.
This time it is worse than when I called in last time.
Okay, interesting. Okay. All right.
I'll explain
so
that.
we're going to try something different here, Brandon. Go ahead and you can hang up now and go back to listen the way you normally do.
You are currently the only
What we're going to do now is I'm going to give you a different phone number, and I want to see if this does the same thing. So Skype, people can call international on Skype when they want to talk to us. And I apologize for those of you, but we have to do this kind of test when we're live, otherwise it's not going to work. We've got a Skype phone number as well. So this is going to be our backup. If this one sounds better, we're going to probably just move to this. The only problem with this is it's not connected to a switchboard, which means that when somebody is calling in, I can't necessarily connect number of lines and leave them on hold and then just bring them on. It's just going to have to call, and you might get through, you might not get through. We don't have typically a lot of callers at the same time on this show, so it shouldn't be an issue. But Brandon, go ahead and call this phone number next. This is 802 802-321-0073. That's 802-321-0073. Go ahead and call that phone number, and I'll bring you on again, and let's see if this improves it. Okay, I think this is him right now. And then accept. Okay. All right. Brandon, how do we sound now? Oh, wait, hang on a second. For some reason, now you're not going through. I can't hear you at all. Okay, hang on a second. I haven't done this one in a long time. This used to be our old... No, hang on a second. For some reason, it's not going through the correct... All right, let's see here. I don't understand why it's not going through the correct speaker. There it is. Okay. All right, Brandon, now go ahead and talk.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now. So how do we sound on this one?
Your audio is perfect compared to the other one.
Yeah, I can hear Brandon very well too.
Okay, so what this is telling me, it's the service we've been using for the switchboard. Okay, so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to use this going forward. This is the old number. If you all remember the old days before we were on
the old number,
before we had the YouTube video version of Vestiges After Dark, when Vestiges in seasons 1, 2, and 3, maybe even 4, I think it was 1, 2, and 3. It was audio only. Right. And then people kept begging me to do a video version. That's how we ended up where we're at now. But I know for the first 3 or 4 seasons, we were audio only. And this was the phone number we used to use to call into the show. The only problem with it is we don't have a way, like I said, to control the switchboard features. So you call, you get through, you might get through, you might not get through. You just have to keep calling back if you can't get through. But it's a brand new, it's the same number, but it's new to this show. So the number that typically gets put into the chat is going to not be correct, or the one that's in the description for the show is not going to be correct tonight. Since it doesn't seem to work, we're going to probably have to change it altogether. So during the break, I will update the information so that it shows up on the screen correctly, and then I will reiterate what that phone number is when the time comes. Okay, so we're not going to be taking calls till probably about the 3rd hour anyway, so it's not an issue. We got time to deal with it. But thank you, Brandon, for helping with that test, and definitely appreciate that. Also joining us from Australia tonight, we have Father Chris Yates. How you doing tonight, Father?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, just enjoying my flat white and enjoying the show.
Yeah.
Watching Brandon flick between screens and phones and all of that. And meanwhile, I haven't logged into Skype for about 6 years, so I thought, I'll log into Skype on my phone. And of course, my phone doesn't know my password, and neither do I. So
it's not really a service that's used anymore. But we purchased. It's a Skype phone number is not much money. I think it's like $2.99 a month. We purchased a Skype phone number for the Vestiges in the early seasons, and that's how we used to take callers. And it worked out fairly well. It's just you can only typically take one call at a time. That's the issue. And we never had problems.
I like Skype. I mean, I like Skype because the guy that developed it refused to basically cash in on it because he believed in connecting the world.
Yeah.
He was
an Nikola Tesla.
So, I've got a bit of time for him.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's not too many people that create just for the sake of improving society anymore. If it's not for profit, people don't seem to want to do it. So it's always nice to see that there are people out there that are doing it without ulterior motives. And Skype's been a good service, and it's a good way for our international people to call and even our local people. If you've got Skype, you can call direct. We'll just make it a standard. So I'll try to update the screen information when the time comes. It might be difficult to do while we're on the air, but I'll do the best that I can. And I'll just definitely make sure that we speak it out for the audience so that they can write down the new number, or it'll be new to them. Okay, so let's get started with questions from the ether. What do we have tonight, Brandon?
So the first question comes from Tiffany, and she asks, or can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay. She asks, hyssop is mentioned in the Bible multiple times, specifically for cleansing and purification. Is there any specific reason why a Christian couldn't dry it and use it for a smoke cleanse?
There's no specific like biblical or religious reasons why you couldn't do that. It's not the way it was used in the Bible.
I
So if-
carry the oil in my bag.
yeah,
I have hyssop oil.
yeah. If you're going to want to use it in a biblical context, turning it into some like form of Christian sage is not going to necessarily be in line with the historical practice. I mean, they used to sprinkle it during various things, but they didn't burn it, to my knowledge. I don't see any reason why you couldn't do that. But I would think that if you're looking to use or have the Christian version of a home purification type of incense, frankincense
Frankincense
is
and
going
myrrh.
to be your best bet. Frankincense and myrrh are wonderful. They are liturgically appropriate. They are absolutely cleansing incense. It's much more effective, in my opinion, than sage in terms of how Christians would be using this. So you really don't need to try to figure out some kind of alternative way. Just use frankincense and myrrh, preferably blessed. Incense should be blessed, but there are properties, spiritual properties, right into the substance itself. But it's just like holy water. You want to have your holy water blessed. Holy oils you want blessed. You should bless the incense as well, or get it blessed rather. So you can bring it to your priest and ask him to do it. That is fine. They might be surprised that you're using incense at home, but they would bless anything that is for spiritual use. At least they should. So that's something you can do, or if you can just send it, buy something or send it to us, and we'll bless it and send it back to you. That's another way that you can do it. But yeah, I wouldn't.
I think.
Go ahead.
This is another example. I think of in a very Protestant world, people with the right instincts, they've actually got these instincts for. I know that there's some physical interaction that I want to have in terms of my prayer life and where I live and all the rest of it. And if you're just a Bible only Christian, then you're only going to look there for a solution. And because what I nearly jumped in when you said, because if you wanted to use hyssop, I nearly said, yeah, you'd have to build the third temple because it's connected to temple worship in Israelite history. And so now for Christians, we believe that the temple is Christ. And so we've you be careful the words you use, because I don't want to disrespect my Jewish brothers who I love. But Christians believe that Jesus is the temple, and that's where incense and holy water kick in, right?
Right.
But you're not going to find that necessarily. I mean, they are obviously you can defend it from the scriptures, but in the practice of the church, we use incense in a similar manner to how hyssop was used in the temple. We use holy water in a similar manner to how hyssop was used in the temple.
Yeah.
So for Christians, and I would say, because I think Christianity is the truth, for everybody, they're better off using incense and burning it. But and I think on its own it will do some good, but obviously sacramentals work better when a person is living a sacramental life entirely and receives the sacraments primarily of baptism and the Eucharist.
Well said. Yeah. I think people sometimes don't want to use sage for the obvious reasons that we've talked about on the show.
Yeah, it's just like anything else. I carry sage in my bag as well. I've got all kinds of stuff in my bag.
Right.
So depends on what situation warrants it. But the hyssop, isn't it mentioned in one of the house blessings we do? Says, sprinkle me with hyssop, O Lord.
Yeah, and that's what they used to
That might be where they're getting it from.
They used to sprinkle it as a type of offering or sacrificial offering. Right. So it wasn't necessarily used in the same kind of protective sense that they would use for sage for in terms of like clarifying a space or purifying a space. And then the Palo Santo
It's the
thing.
penitential psalm, right?
Yeah.
So it's all part of the preparation for something holy,
Right.
Sprinkle me with hyssop and I shall be clean.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll be whiter than snow. But it's actually about confessing sins. So in that sense, you'd be much better off if you don't, rather than just sprinkling random things around your house, you'd be better off reading Psalm 51.
Yes. Yeah. And that's true. Because, the problem with sage and Palo Santo, okay, is that they come from a particular tradition that requires that the practitioner develop a relationship with the spirits that are therein contained in those substances. Christians typically today, the modern Christian, has no connection to the spirits that are part of the traditions that utilize Palo Santo and sage. So at worst, it becomes a type of appropriation almost, where you're just grabbing something because there's spiritual use somewhere in the world, and you want to try to take that power for yourself. So I respect somebody looking to try to find an alternative to doing that, because honestly, I do think that it is inappropriate to use sage if you do not have a spiritual relationship with the particular spirits that govern that substance. I would actually say that about marijuana too, but I know I'd get into all sorts of trouble, so we're not going to go there.
It's a whole other show.
But the fact of the matter is,
I just think it stinks.
Yeah, it smells like skunk, doesn't it?
Horrible.
Yeah. Vegas pretty much smells only like that now.
It's unbearable.
You can't go down to
LA's the same.
Fremont without being overwhelmed by it.
When I came to see you in Georgia, it was like
a breath of fresh air. Oh, they have it here too. They just don't. They don't advertise it because it's still not legal. But the thing is, there are spirits that govern these substances, and we need to have a relationship with them. And I guarantee you, the average person does not, and doesn't even know how to. And a lot of times, unless you're born into that particular kind of tradition, you can't have that kind of relationship. So it's very important, I think, to do things appropriately, and the Christian has access to far better tools than sage and Palo Santo. And I'm just going to leave it at that. And you can get any of those things from us. If you're a member of this church, all benefactors, can have this sent out to them: holy water, exercise oil, and we will even, if you find an incense you like, you can send it to us. We'll bless it and send it back to you. Okay. All members of this church have that as an option. Okay. So you don't really need to worry about things like sage and Palo Santo or even hyssop. We got better tools today. All right. What's our next one?
So the next question actually comes from April. She says, I was reading the introduction to the book of Revelations, and it is describing 4 views of interpreting Revelations: the preterist view, the historic view, the symbolic view, and the futuristic view. Which view do you, or does the Holy Nicolaitan Church, lean more towards?
All of them.
I think the Catholic view would encompass all of them. The Holy Nicolaitan Catholic Church would probably, though, and I'd say this is probably true for Roman Catholicism as well, and definitely true for Orthodoxy. We tend to focus more specifically on the preterist and the symbolic views as a combination effect. There's not one view that we hold. We don't typically have a futuristic view on this, because other than the fact that Jesus will return, there's nothing else about the book of Revelation that is relevant to anything that's going to happen from this point forward. 95% of the book of Revelation happened in the first century.
Right.
All of that was about events in the first century. So the preterist view is probably the most accurate one. But the symbolic view is important, because what the symbolic view says is that Revelation as a complete work uses its apocalyptic symbology to convey timeless spiritual truths that are theologically relevant to us today.
That's what speaks to me more than the other three.
Yes. But the fact of the matter is the preterist view is the more accurate one, because I can tell you right now, St. John the Apostle was said to write this when he was in exile. That's tradition, of course. It probably is not true historically speaking. But I can tell you right now, the person who wrote the book of Revelation did not intend this to be a book for people today to be reading, and probably had no thought at all that it would be still read today, or even included in what would become a new biblical canon, because at that time it would have been just, they weren't writing these things down to become a new scripture. Right. They weren't writing these things down to replace the Old Testament. That is something that happened, a couple hundred years after all this stuff was written down. And so they would never have seen it that way. But the preterist view is the most accurate one to most biblical scholars, and largely to how both Orthodoxy and the Catholic Church kind of view the events as they're depicted. Because, of course, the Antichrist is not somebody that's coming. The Antichrist or the beast and all this stuff are talking about the Emperor Nero, the Roman Empire, the great apostasy that takes place here is, the falling away, and all of this stuff is just related back to how Rome was persecuting Christians and how the Christians had to speak in a type of allegorical apocalyptic code that everyone knew who was in that club, to be able to talk of treasonous things without getting executed for doing so. And this was treason. I mean, you could not call the emperor of Rome the beast, without suffering ramifications for that. So the way that you do this is you would write it into this apocalyptic code using, various types of ancient numerological systems and putting it together in a way that the ancient Christian could understand. So that is ultimately what is being conveyed here. But that is not to say that there's not symbolic theological truth here. And that's where the important value is. And that's why it was included in the canon. It almost wasn't. It almost wasn't even included in the canon. It was really, I hate to call it a last minute decision, but it kind of was, in the sense that there was enough value there to say, well, it does speak to the new heaven and the new earth, the return of Jesus, and that in the end, it's the only book really in Scripture that makes it ultimately clear that in the end, the universe is restored, and all of us with it. It's the only book that really speaks to that. And that is the only futuristic part of the book of Revelation.
Good archetypal story.
It is. Unfortunately, though, it has now been turned into a type of fortune-telling device.
God, yeah.
It's basically it's worse than a deck of tarot cards, because now every Christian...
You get that Left Behind stuff going on.
Yeah. Go ahead, Father.
Mm-hmm. I find it fascinating that the reformers... by the way, I'm sure Martin Luther would be horrified by how the Book of Revelation is being used by
no doubt
his successors. But I find it interesting that the reformers retained the Book of Revelation in the canon and kicked out the books of Maccabees. I mean, it's so bizarre. And so because the books of Maccabees certainly have historical veracity, the story of Hanukkah is from there.
I love those books.
Obviously the Catholic and Orthodox Bibles retain them. Mm-hmm. The other thing I'd say is that if people think, because I like the question, because the answer to the question is, I like your question because it helps me to explain why that question is the wrong question. Because there are many things in the scriptures, of the Christian faith, where there are multiple lines of explanation, and actually the church doesn't choose. So I'll be very brief. The easiest example is salvation through Jesus Christ. So there are three main doctrines associated with that. One is that Jesus dies as an expiation for sin, a ransom for sin. So Jesus died for my sins. That's stressed more in Protestant, evangelical and charismatic churches.
Yeah, that's how I was
It's
raised.
stressed more. Okay.
Yeah.
There's the Christus Victor, that Christ is victorious on the cross, and there's theosis. There's the salvation that God becomes becomes a man, so that man can become like God. And the truth is that the church believes all three.
Yeah.
Orthodox Catholic churches believe all three. Now, it's true that in the Catholic and Orthodox churches, they tend to stress more Christus Victor and theosis. But they do also believe that Jesus paid the price for our sins. So there's an example of, like, if the question was asked, which of those three does the church believe? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a little bit of it in there. I think really, though, these are academic designations that are used from biblical scholars to try to.
They're not separate at all. They're all
Right.
in one event, right?
And right. Theologically, you have to tie them all in together. But I think what the biblical historian is trying to achieve is, what was the mind of the author? Was he trying to write a futuristic book that was telling the future for our time, for people 2,000 years later? Was he trying to write in code the struggles and give hope to the Christians who are being persecuted in his own time? Was he trying to write a great theological work? I don't think he was trying to write a great theological work. I don't think he was trying to write some kind of a future prediction or prophecy. I think he was definitely trying to write about, maintain hope. Jesus is coming. Jesus will take care of everything. And regardless of how the Roman Empire is persecuting us today, Jesus is still in charge. That's the message. And so that's the preterist view. So if you're looking at it strictly academically, it's the preterist view. If you're looking at theologically, there's bits and pieces of all of that have value. But it's, I think what's dangerous is when it starts to become like, I think it was Calico that was saying, no, it was Brandon. It was you, Brandon, when you said the people that have to crack the code as if it's like some kind of mysterious little message that God left, and only the smart people can do it. That's nonsense. In fact, it's extreme nonsense.
It's sinful. It's prideful.
It is.
It's prideful.
It is. And it's particularly so that Jesus himself said that you will not know the day or the hour. Only Father himself knows. So why would he give us a book that needs to be cracked by humans in order to figure out what only the Father knows? That does not make any sense at all. And yet people will continue to do it.
I love that these questions come, because what they reveal is why Jesus did not leave us with the letter of Jesus to the church.
The letter of Jesus. Yeah.
He never wrote. The only thing we know he wrote was in the sand when the woman was caught in adultery. We don't know what he wrote. It was in sand and it blew away. And so, and we've talked about that on the show before.
Yes. There are
we
theories.
can speculate and have. We can creatively. We can sit with anything we like to think about that. But that what Jesus did leave us with was the apostles and a church. And so when we say, as Catholics and Orthodox Christians, what do the fathers say? What does the church teach? We're not saying, what does Pope Francis today say in an interview on 60 Minutes, for example, right? We're not saying that. He doesn't have that authority. By the way, he'd be the first to say that. Neither does the Patriarch of Constantinople. What we're saying is we defer to the hermeneutic, the development, the opinion, the thoughts, the reflections of the entire church from the earliest times. And if you do that, you won't necessarily get everything right, because God is a mystery beyond our knowing. We can't be like God in a sense. We can't share his intellect, because God is always going to be beyond our intellect, even in heaven. But we have confidence that if we follow what the church teaches, that the Holy Spirit guides that, and that although we might not be entirely right, we won't go far wrong to the point of perdition.
Right.
That's the purpose of the church. It's not that we idolize the fathers or try and ascribe to a group of men the power of God. It's that we say, well, actually, God is at work through history beyond that. And so we don't need to look to the book of Revelation for a prediction of the future. That wasn't Jesus' intention.
Right.
He left us a church that would guard us and guide us in the future.
Right. That's very well said. And it's an important message I think Christians need to keep in mind always, because you're right. We look to the fathers of the church because if we're going to, as Christians, use a 2,000-year-old document as the ultimate supreme authority, then it stands to reason that you want to know at least what people said about it who were the closest to the ones that wrote it, and that just makes logical sense. And that's really the only reason why the fathers of the church are so central, is because they were there. They were closest to that point in time. Now, if Christianity had taken on more of a philosophical stance of evolution, where there wasn't any book involved, kind of like how the Eastern religions operate. They don't, they have scriptures and they have writings of important figures, but they're not religions of the book like Islam, Christianity, and Judaism are. And so, they're freer to sort of expand in the various directions of wherever their religion guides them or to go. And so it changes through time. They're not having to go back and reference specifically. I mean, of course, there's always going to be, though, some central figure, right? In Buddhism, you got Buddha. And of course, you're going to want to know what the people that were closest to him might have thought about him. And the same principle at work here in Christianity. But that's all it is. That's all it is. It shouldn't be an excuse to be stuck in the rigid focus on the past. That's not what it's there for. But nor is it, nor are any of these things designed to be something other than what they were intended to be. Same thing with Paul's writings. They're wonderful theological devices for us today because it does give us an idea as to how Paul worked through some of the problems that the church had. But he was not writing the epistles with any understanding that they would become dogmatic statements. I mean, these were conversational in many cases. And can you imagine if you took your text messages that you were sending your friends, and then somebody made a religion of that 2,000 years later, right? And then they were used. I mean, can you imagine?
Or watch this show.
or watch this show. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So just so the people, in the year 4000, okay, I'm speaking to you now. Nothing I say is dogmatic, okay? Do not make a religion around us.
Before the year 4000.
I hope so too. But you never know. I mean, we don't know. We don't know. But anyway, so there you go. No, Revelation was not intended to be a prophetic book for now or for the so-called end times. Because remember, in the Christian tradition of which the book of Revelation comes out of, the end times were then.
Yeah.
They started as soon as Pentecost and the tongues of fire came down and the church set out to do its work. That's the end times. We've been in the end times the entire time. The last 1950 years we've been in the end times.
Not even a blink to God.
No, not even a blink. So it's ridiculous to think that, this must be it.
Yeah.
This must be it. Biden's president. That must mean it's the end of the world.
Because he's that important.
He's that important. Yeah, right. Like any of us are.
The USA is that important.
Like any of us are.
Yeah.
Like any person could possibly be that important, but they want to find that Antichrist. And unfortunately for them, Antichrist isn't one person.
It's Emperor Nero, and it's within us too.
You're right.
I was about to say,
right, yeah.
we are basically the Antichrist.
Well, the Bible almost always refers to it in the plural.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't really single it out. It doesn't imply. It's just saying that the primary Antichrist that the book of Revelation is talking about is, of course, the oppression of Rome.
Right.
And that would have been Nero at the time. And he was a very brutal.
He was a nut.
Brutal emperor
Yes.
towards Christians. Yeah, absolutely.
Didn't he? He's the one that started the fires and blamed it on the Christians.
Yeah. I think that was him.
I think
Yeah.
we talked about that before.
And to riff off the late Cardinal of Chicago, where are Nero's successors today? No one knows. No one cares.
No one cares.
Where's the successor of the fisherman given charge by Jesus Christ to lead his church and hanged upside down in the square.
Right.
He's in Rome today.
Which means that the book of Revelation is a genuine prophetic message because it all came to pass.
Look what happened.
Everything that the book of Revelation predicts did actually happen. It did actually happen. Because it's talking about how, eventually the beast would be thrown away. There'd be the 1,000 years of peace that these, dispensationalists are still waiting for. It's like, you're in it. You're in the 1,000 years of peace right now. I know it's not what you really would hope for, but this is the 1,000 years of peace because guess what? You're not being persecuted right now. Now there are places where you can freely practice your Christianity. Not that anyone wants to anymore. They don't care anymore. But, the fact of the matter is...
They want to practice it in the places where they can't.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Well, that's something about the Christian faith, right? It's only when you're confronted with another ideology that you realize, even people that are just kind of vaguely Christian, they only realize that how amazing Christianity is as a foundation to society when they go to a society where it's not the foundation.
That's exactly true. And we got to also remember the book of Revelation was...
It's easier to preach in Pakistan than it is in Australia.
It's true. No, it is true.
It's just more dangerous.
Yeah.
That's true. But anyway, that should answer the question, I think. What is the view of this church, or mine in particular? Preterist with a touch of the symbolic.
And so for our final question, when you go to a location where it's said a spirit resides who died 100 plus years ago, is that actually still the spirit of the individual who died, or would it be more of an egregore of that individual?
It could be either one. There is something that I've observed, and so this is something that I teach in my model, that there is something called spiritual degradation. And without going into all the metaphysics again, you've heard me talk about it. If you digging around in the archives of this show, you'll hear me discuss it probably more than once. When a person's body dies, the incorporeal part of them, call it a spirit or a soul, depending upon which semantics you want to use, degrades with it. It just degrades at a different rate. So the incorporeal parts maintain cohesion slightly longer than the physical parts do, okay? And that gets projected out as its own thought form. So basically, what is a ghost? Well, a ghost is a thought form of the deceased person, still projecting themselves out as if they're still alive. This is why it only happens when a person doesn't die well, typically, because you would only create a thought form of yourself when you don't understand what actually happened to you. Mm-hmm. That's the only time you'd ever have to do that. Because if you were actually following the path to Christ, then you wouldn't need to worry about, maintaining some kind of cohesion here on this earth. You'd realize that it's time to give it up. And you'd want to. You'd actually want to. You'd be prepared for that. But people that don't die well, or die with a lot of attachments, or die unexpectedly, they try to hold on, and that's what they do. They create a thought form, and then that thought form becomes a projection of whatever's left. Okay, but that doesn't last forever. Okay, it's still stuck in entropy. You're still in the same universe. It's not like they live in some other universe. No, it's right here, right now, and this place, everything is going to die. Everything eventually ends here, and the same thing with this energy. It dissipates over time. So it could be a thought form of the deceased individual. If there's a large amount of attachment there, and that they're finding a source to feed on to keep that energy alive. So it could go on for 100 years. It's unlikely to, but it could. It probably wouldn't go on for 1,000 years, but it could, in theory, go on for at least 100 if the conditions are right. But more than likely, a situation like this is the result of the expectations of the paranormal investigators creating their own thought forms about what they think happened, and that becomes the ghost that they interact with on their investigations. So it could be either one.
I was asked a question that seems unrelated this week by a friend of mine. Mm-hmm. He's an Australian, a Catholic who moved to America.
Okay.
He lives there now. He's married an American, and he asked why he went to a funeral, or saw a funeral with an open coffin, and he was Like in Australia, they generally don't do that, but in Britain and Ireland, or certainly Northern England and Ireland and Scotland, especially Catholics, do have open coffins, and all the Orthodox do. All the Orthodox Church, almost always. There are obviously exceptions, but almost always there's an open coffin at a funeral. And he said, why is this? And I said, well, look, Catholics and Orthodox are accused of sometimes being a bit obsessed with death, right? If you go to a lot of these ancient churches in Europe, they've literally got the bodies of priests and bishops, as relics in the whole body.
Go to the catacombs.
The bones of martyrs.
You'll be neck deep in bones.
I've been to the catacombs, and yes, it's above your head.
Yeah. So I mean, even where my sister lives in Gran Canaria, Las Palmas Cathedral, there is a bishop in a glass box next to a side altar, and he's venerated. Now, why do we do this? It's because Catholic and Orthodox Christians are encouraged to always consider their death imminent.
Yes.
And again, the Book of Revelation is actually a reminder of that for people, because I mean they didn't need reminding that they were going to die because they were under tyranny, right? But memento mori is a really important concept.
It's a very important one.
I have a ring that says memento mori.
I'm glad you bring this up, Father, because there's a question that comes up often at the Mass when we stream our live Mass to this YouTube channel. Or Facebook. We simulcast the Mass to Facebook and YouTube. You don't really see it that much anymore because we've changed the lectern, and so the lectern that used to be up front is now the one that holds the Roman ritual in the back. So you kind of really strain to see it. You might not even be able to see it, but we have a skull on that lectern, and it's been there, and it used to be up front, so it would be the obvious thing, and people would be like, "Why do you have a skull in your church?" And it's like,
wait till we drink out of it. Doing some Teresa, was it Teresa of Avila?
Don't give him any more fuel for the fire.
That bit clipped, and that's the end.
Oh my God! But the reality is, it's to constantly keep us in mind of our position, of what we're here to accomplish, what we're here to do. We're here to die well, all right? And there's really no other purpose to it. Life is here as an opportunity to learn how to die well. And so this is a way to...
A crucifix, a traditional crucifix, especially in iconography, always has a skull at the bottom. That's the old Adam and the new Adam.
Yep, and Golgotha too as well. Yeah, it actually represents that. And again,
the place of the skull.
Place of the skull. So, in line with, we're talking about how there's people will see things that I do and think that they need to get high and mighty and correct me because, of course, I must be an idiot. I'm only a bishop, but I must be a moron. I got an email this past week from an individual that is a fan of Ghost Adventures, and so I thought I would answer this on the air as well, since we have a little bit of time.
I remember they gave me shit the first time I
they did
too, saying that I did it wrong.
Yeah,
too.
So let me read the email, and then we'll see who the one is in the wrong here. Okay, so I'm not gonna give names. Okay, but the message came in on May 14th. I watch Ghost Adventures regularly. I've seen Bishop Brian on several episodes. As a practicing Roman Catholic, I find it difficult to understand why the bishop fails to make the sign of the cross correctly. Every Catholic was taught and knows that the sign of the cross is up, down, and all caps now, left to right. Bishop Brian consistently crosses himself, all caps, right to left, which is an error. Which is an error, she says. Okay, while I do not doubt he is a man of great faith, thank you for that, I wanted to bring this to his attention. As a branch different than the Roman Catholic Church, I find it difficult to comprehend why he inverses this sacred sign. Kindly bring this to the attention of Bishop Brian. Okay, so she did. The church sent out an email to her that explains why this happens, and
it was such more eloquent than what I was thinking in my response. So I'm glad that was done.
Yeah, but I think it's something that needs to be addressed because there is a bit of an elitist tone to this, which is something I'm used to receiving and quite typical of Roman Catholics when I interact with them. Is that you don't know what you're doing, and we do, and so you need to correct your errors, kind of thing. That's the attitude, okay, that I encounter.
And what I was told when I was a 7-year-old at Sunday school is absolute authority and comprehensive.
Yes.
Yes, right. I know, right. But the fact of the matter is, okay, that the Orthodox Church and the Eastern churches, including the Eastern Catholic churches that are under Rome, all cross themselves from right to left. Okay, so when I do the sign of the cross, yes, I go to my right side. Why do I do that? Well, number one, the Nicolean Catholic Church has its roots in the Eastern Orthodox Church. Okay, so even though we are largely today a Roman Rite implementation of or iteration of Christianity, it wasn't always that way. We used to do the Divine Liturgy of St. John Chrysostom before we switched over and eventually out of necessity went to the Mass of Vatican II, which creates its own controversy, I guess you could say, Novus Ordo. But why we continue to do right to left is A, because of our roots, and we find value in that history. B, did I say A or one? I think I said A and B. B, that it's the older way to do it. It's the Roman Catholic Church that changed it, folks. It wasn't. Everyone did it for right.
The blessing that the priest gives.
It is.
If you think about it,
it mirrors that.
The priest gives the blessing like this.
It does,
and you match it.
But it also is because when Christ separates the lambs from the sheep from the goats, he puts them on his right. Christ sits at the right hand of God. So you go to the right first. And when you think about it, my question is, why would you invert it? Why did you guys do it? Because we're doing it the original way.
Let's try and steal my. I mean, look, I actually think that it sounded like a fairly respectful email, so I'm really not ridiculing.
It wasn't terribly bad, but there was a little bit of edge to it, I think.
I think she genuinely thought that you were in error.
Doing it wrong.
She doesn't know.
Yeah.
I think she doesn't know. And so that's fine, and actually she asked the question, right?
Yeah.
So,
yes, and I got to say, and she did respond back very nicely. Okay. So nothing against this person who asked this question.
Social media.
Yeah,
but you could maybe legitimately say, let's try and steal my argument, that if you're going to use the Western Rite, you should cross yourself in the Western style. If you're going to use the Eastern Rite, you should cross yourself in the Eastern style. There is, however, a flaw in that argument. Could you show me in the Catechism of the Catholic Church where it tells you which way to cross yourself?
Right.
No, you can't.
Right.
So in fact, there's no requirement for you to cross yourself when you enter a church. It's a holy custom.
Right.
It's something which is, it's like something that's so ubiquitous and part of being in the church that everyone does it. Mm-hmm. But there's no mandate for it. It doesn't say in the general instruction of the Roman Missal, the layperson walks in the church, dips his finger in the holy water and makes the sign of the cross. Left shoulder first. Not there.
What's shocking to me, Father, is the sheer volume of ignorance that Roman Catholics have towards orthodoxy. They just don't understand the Eastern Christian traditions at all. Anything from the Antimencian to even the way the cross is. I mean, Catholics will cross themselves with the open hand, left to right, right? I mean, Orthodoxy puts the two fingers in for the two natures of Christ, and then the three fingers together represented Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and then cross. I mean, there's all these different, very mindful things that Orthodoxy has that Rome just completely threw out. So my question to this person would be, or any Roman Catholic that has a problem with anything that we do as Nicolean Catholics, is why do you guys keep chipping away at the wonderful spirituality that
do you, boo?
You used to have.
Yeah.
But again, it's nothing against this person who asked the question. It's just there is a growing and we see it with Catholic Answers. They are like the poster child for what I'm about to say. There is a growing elitism in Catholicism. We're the original church. We're the only ones that know anything. And all of you are wrong. And look at how stupid you are. Look at how, and they sit there. I mean, Catholic Answers will sit there and laugh at people, other Christians, for doing different things or doing things, that are not correct. You maybe use it as a teaching opportunity when something's truly an error. But maybe spend some time on your own people.
It doesn't seem to happen on the Eastern side. I mean, I was at an Orthodox funeral fairly recently. It wasn't a Eucharist. It was a funeral service.
Yeah.
And there was a Coptic priest there, and I saw him cross himself, and he crossed himself left to right.
Oh, really?
And I said, he's a nice guy. I've met him before. I said, that's interesting. He said, yeah, well, I'm a Western Rite priest within the Coptic Church. I thought it's very interesting. So, in other words, they seem to know, and they're far more humble about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Nicolaitan tradition is almost a perfect blend right down the middle. We do follow, though, because we are in the West, we do follow the Western calendar. I don't think I could ever get used to celebrating Christmas in January. I mean, I just don't think
I could either.
I don't think I would ever want to, honestly.
The Greeks have shifted to the 25th of December.
Yeah.
For Christmas.
No, because
Greek Orthodox.
archetypally, why not celebrate it with the rest of the world as it should be? That's what it was always meant to be anyway. The dates don't really matter.
The calendar is fixing. We should all be using the same calendar.
We should.
That is a tragedy.
It is a tragedy. And if I had my wife say, let's put the whole church on the West for Christmas and then put the whole church on the East for Easter, and we'll be all set. We'll be all set, I think.
That's what the Greeks have done, basically.
Yeah, that's smart. I'm glad that they do that. All right, we're going to take our top of the hour break here. When we come back, we will have our guest, April Norrod, to talk about Paranormal Investigating 101. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone, to the second part of Vestiges After Dark as we now get ready to embark upon the journey of paranormal investigation and some of the ins and outs and do's and don'ts associated with the task. When we come back here, we will be joined by returning guest April Norrod to discuss this with us, and we'll be taking your questions on the third hour. Remember, there is a new phone number, and I just updated it for the screen. I'll put it up there on the third hour, and I'll, make sure that I say it out to the audio-only people when we're ready to start taking calls. Okay? Should be good. So far, everything's working tonight. The equipment's working, so I'm not complaining too much. We'll be back after this. Okay, so our returning guest tonight is April Norrod, who founded Curious Things Investigations during the pandemic of 2020. What began as a hobby has since evolved into a professional pursuit, with April and her team conducting over 100 investigations to date. They've explored some of the most renowned haunted locations, including Waverly Hills Sanatorium, Brushy Mountain Penitentiary, Old South Pittsburgh Hospital, Old Historic Harriman Hospital, Scott County Jail, Octagon Hall, and Thomas House Bed and Breakfast. April employs a diverse array of equipment and research and is well versed in the latest investigative techniques. Her expertise has led to a guest appearance on Britain's Pulse talk radio show, The Paranormal World of Philip Solomon. Furthermore, April and her team host paranormal investigations at the historic Gaines House Civil War Field Hospital, with proceeds dedicated to the restoration of this historic site. Over the past 4 years, the team has evolved, but their core mission, to assist individuals experiencing paranormal phenomenon, remains steadfast. Tonight, April will share her extensive knowledge on the intricacies of paranormal investigations. And so let us welcome April back to Vestiges After Dark. How you doing tonight, April?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We are fantastic. Great to have you here with us again.
Thank you. I'm excited to be doing tonight's episode because it's way more fun than the one I did last time.
That's true. It's a little bit more entertaining, I guess you could say.
A little less serious.
Yeah, a little bit less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say that when I saw your post on the network about where I was going to go over paranormal equipment, I messaged Brandon. I said, does he have any idea how much equipment I have?
I'm sure you have quite a bit. And I guess we could just talk about it in general terms or touch on some of your favorites. But I think to get started here, before we dive right into the actual subject matter, let's talk about how, I kind of went over a little bit with your bio there, but how did you really come to start pursuing this? Is it something that, you've always believed in? Was it something that you wanted to set out to convince yourself if it's true or not? What was your motivation for originally getting into it? And to the point that, not everybody goes and creates a paranormal investigation group. So what was your real insight into what motivated you to do that or inspired you to do that?
When I was younger, my mom's family specifically would talk about stories of paranormal events that they had happen to them. And I was always fascinated by it. And so it would be her and her sister and her brothers, and we would sit down, like usually on stormy nights when the power was out, and we'd talk about, things that had happened to them. My first experience with the paranormal actually was, I feel like that me and my sister were actually abducted one time when I was very young. I think she's about 7 years younger than me. I think she was 3. So that would put me at about 6 to 10. No, I'm sorry, 9 or 10, somewhere in there when we had this experience. So that's really kind of where I got my start.
So your first experience with the paranormal was an alien experience?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Wow.
I have no proof of that, right?
Right.
It's just an experience that happened, and I can kind of tell you what it was.
Yeah.
I woke up one morning, and I thought it was a dream is what it was. And the only thing I can really remember about it is I remember like hiding under the covers and something being in the room. And I was like kind of peeking out. And then the next thing I remember is like, because I lived on a farm. And so my bedroom window overlooked like a pond. And so I remember looking out my window and seeing like a light from I'm assuming a UFO and some kind of alien entity there. And I remember my sister was beside me and we were both doing the same thing. And so what I remember is that next morning I got up and I went to Mom and I said, I had the weirdest dream. And I kind of told her the event of what had happened. Mm-hmm. And then shortly after I was up, probably an hour or so later, my sister gets up and she says, I had a weird dream too. And it was the exact same story. So from that, it makes me think that we both had the same experience that happened to us.
Well, it also has many of the same markers. A lot of people that have these experiences tend to remember them almost like they're dreamlike in a way, but yet they still know that they're somehow different from simply being a dream that they had. There's some kind of remarkable difference to how things unfolded, almost as if you're being manipulated to remember it as a dream.
And there was another event happened when I was in college. I believe I was working on my bachelor's degree, and a friend of mine had come over, and we had walked out. Like I said, I lived on a farm, so there was like 3 fields, and we'd gone to what we called the middle field. And she was with me, and this part I don't remember, but apparently we looked up in the sky and saw a UFO. And we were talking about it several years later, and she says, "You don't remember that?" And I'm like, "I do not." So I figure, that was another one of those things where something had happened in that moment that I just don't remember what happened. So
yeah, no, that's interesting. I would not have thought that. I didn't know that, actually. Well, we haven't actually had a chance to talk about it, but that is really kind of interesting to me that your first step into the paranormal was the alien encounter.
That's a hell of a way to step in.
It definitely is. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a disturbing way to step into it. Honestly, I think hauntings are probably more mainstream and more manageable. The alien abduction experience seems to be much more unsettling for most people when I talk to them. And we occasionally do, even in my ministry, get people that contact us because they have had an alien abduction experience and they don't know where to go for help. Of course, some of that might have to do with the fact that a lot of people believe aliens to be demons. But even outside of that, even if a person isn't fully aware of what it is that they had, they just know that it was the classic abduction experience, they still don't know who to turn to. So an exorcist seems like a good first step, I guess.
yeah, and from there, I tried to research and to what I could as a kid, and then of course, as I got older, I've always been, like I said, I've always been interested in the other side of the paranormal, even like ESP and like telekinesis. All of that stuff is really interesting to me. Yeah. And then I started watching some of the reality shows and things like that. And then in 2020, when we were all like locked down in our caves, I did a post. I thought, well, if I go and hang out with ghosts, I'm not going to be exposed to COVID. So I asked at that point, is there anybody know any haunted locations? And there was actually another paranormal team in this area who reached out to me and said, check out this group. And so I went with them on an investigation, and that's where I kind of got hooked. Okay. And then, and as I started the investigation, I laugh now because I was so scared. It's like I was terrified my first experience going with them on an investigation. And now I feel a lot more confident in it, I guess. Yeah. I still have that healthy level of, I guess, respect and stuff, but I'm not as terrified as I was. But I'm still fascinated by UFOs, and there's places that we've gone that there'll be times I'll be looking up in the sky looking for UFOs too. But it's just harder to find that evidence, I believe. That's what I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are things that can be done, but there are definitely not things that are recommended by people that are into researching that side of the paranormal. In fact, a lot of them don't want to even be associated with the paranormal community. UFO is almost its own thing, and doesn't really like being under the paranormal umbrella in the same way that ghost or demon hunters, and all that. That's
why they've renamed them UAPs.
Well, I think some of that's also to try to normalize it, to get it away from some of the more sensational thinking, because there is something happening out there, whether you believe in aliens or not, whether you believe in spaceships from other planets or not. There is something happening, and the governments of the world are starting to acknowledge and recognize that. So I mean, it is a valid part of the paranormal investigation world, I think, but I guess they just don't, in the same reason that psychology doesn't want to be associated with spirituality today, even though it kind of started as the same thing. They've kind of went their separate ways. Psychology and spirituality are different divisions.
Well, it is paranormal. I mean, paranormal means outside of normal.
Outside of normal. But I think it's got its own semantics and implications,
which is why they've changed what they're called.
People seem to be more eager to believe in aliens than they are in ghosts, it seems. I find that. I think it's just maybe more of it's seen as a bit more rational. I think
it's more scientifically plausible, but actually, if they thought about it, it's far less plausible. that's not to deny it.
Yeah.
It's just to say, out of the two,
How
it's less plausible to suppose that if intelligent life is so far away that they would be able to reach us without expiring first. Like, it's
Yeah, it's true. That's fascinating, April. I mean, maybe we'll have to have you on to talk more about that. I don't know if you've heard my own personal experience. It wasn't really an abduction. It started out as what could have become that, but it didn't go that direction. But I've had 2 experiences with the Greys, and I've talked a lot about that on this show. And I don't know if you've heard those episodes, but we should probably have you on next season to talk a little more about the alien encounter. I'd like to hear more about that. But anyway, tonight you don't typically go looking for aliens as much as you look for ghosts, I'm guessing.
Correct. That's correct.
Right.
Easier
Okay.
to find.
After that event, I would just and actually talk about the Greys. I used to be so terrified of them. Like I would watch a TV show about them and I would have nightmares.
Yeah.
So it's like I was very terrified of them.
I find them to be more unsettling than ghosts. Absolutely. I find them to be more unsettling than demons, to be honest with you.
Well, because you know the rules that demons have to go by.
Yeah.
Aliens, not so much.
Right. It's true. So let's talk about paranormal investigation, because people that have followed me in this show for a long time know that I have mixed feelings on it. I'm part of it, obviously, because I've become part of the community in the sense that I'm on the shows, I'm kind of recognized more for that than I am for what I actually do. I think people, when they hear Bishop Brian, they think of the exorcist. They don't think of the pastor, which is really kind of sad to me, honestly, but that's just the way TV is, right? You kind of have to accept reality. So I don't want to give the impression at all throughout tonight's show that I'm being permissive of it, because I do feel, and I have reason for this, and I'll qualify it in a moment. I do feel that lay recreational paranormal investigation is far more dangerous than just about anything else that a person can do when they're messing around with the unknown. Right. Far more dangerous than tarot cards or astrology or witchcraft or the whole occult put together, in my opinion. And the reason for that, and the reason I say that, is that when you look at our caseload, if we start to break them down scientifically and you get to like the root cause, and that's always what I'm interested in finding out first, is when did these problems, when a person comes to me and says, I need an exorcist, the first thing I want to know is, well, when did this, that you're coming to me for, when did this start? What problem that you're coming to me for, when did that first start to become a problem? And how did it become a problem? And oftentimes, it's because they went on a paranormal investigation, they brought something home, and they just couldn't get rid of it after that. Yep. And we see this over and over and over and over again. So in the sense that I would say, I understand the interest. I'm not sure it's worth the risks. So I'm going to also speak, and April, I'm sure, is going to speak to a little bit, because I think we're largely on the same page with a lot of this. But I'm going to speak to some of it in the sense that if you're going to do this, and I'm a libertarian. I'm never going to tell you to do anything. Okay. As long as you don't mess with my life, I'm not going to mess with your life. That's the way I live. Okay. So I don't really care what anybody does. But if you're coming to me for professional help or advice, then you're going to get that. And I'm going to give you the best advice I can give. And I'm going to say that regardless of what you think about paranormal investigation, it seems to end very poorly for a very large number of them. Okay. But there's some reasons for that. There's usually a very weak spiritual foundation. They have no relationship to God to speak of most of the time. This is just talking in general terms, not always. But in general terms, these seem to be the common denominators to what we end up encountering. So you have people that are just, I think, using paranormal investigation as a way to try to validate faith, in the sense that, well, I'm having a hard time believing in God, but maybe if I saw a demon, it'd be easier to believe in God. So I'm going to go look for demons.
Or they're just thrill seekers.
And they're thrill seekers, that too. So there's a lot of different motivations out there. The least of which is what you described, April, is that most people are not doing it to help people. They're doing it because they're just wanting to entertain themselves, and they find this kind of like a living haunted house, no pun intended. It's kind of like a real haunted house, and they want the same thrill that the like the little amusement park versions of it would give, with actors or little mannequins or something. So I don't want to give the impression at anything I say tonight, whether it be positive or negative, that I endorse paranormal investigating for recreation. Personally, as an exorcist, I do not. As an individual, I don't care what you do. But as an exorcist, I would say steering clear of it, unless you really, really know what you're doing. So, April, in your experience, in terms of how this goes, what are you finding the motivations of people are when you either like take new members into your group, or do you outline your specific goals clearly, or do you just kind of decide whether or not after a time whether or not the person's a right fit for you? But how do you deal with some of these challenges that happen with the paranormal?
Well, I think I would be lying if I said that I didn't originally get into this a little bit for a thrill sake, but mostly just because I wanted the experience. I never had experienced any kind of ghost or anything like that. So that was probably my original draw to it. However, since that time, I mean, one of the first investigations that we went on was former coworker had asked me to come to their house and investigate it, and then we went to a cemetery. And while we was at the cemetery, a lady pulls up and asked what we were doing, and I told her, and she says, "Oh, can you help me talk to my daughter?" And so, one of the tools that I use is the dowsing rods. And if people aren't familiar with those, they used to be used back in the day. It's two pieces. This is what they are right here. It's two pieces of copper that's bent, and they used to use it to find water.
Yep.
And but you can also use it to talk to spirits. And so that would be the first piece of equipment, one of the first pieces I used. And so through that, she was able to basically try to communicate with her daughter. And of course, now after being one of your students, I'm learning that maybe they're actually communicating with their own subconscious. But either way, for her, it gave her relief because she was crying and she had not had closure. Yeah. And so by doing that process, I mean, it was very moving to see her have some closure, to realize that her daughter was at peace and that her daughter had forgiven her for certain things that had happened in life.
Yes.
And that was kind of like, wow. I mean, that was just very, very moving. So from that point on, anytime we go anywhere, we're always trying to, we definitely take a very serious, our own spiritual safety. We don't want anything to attach to us or to become possessed ourselves. Right. So we always try to pray before we start an investigation. And we all, as I'm learning more, it's like we try to make sure our mind is in a good place. If we're depressed or in a bad headspace, we want to make sure that we try to clear that up. So we try to make sure we do some of that stuff. We make sure that nobody goes by themselves. We always have a team. There's one or two of us together. But as far as building a group, when I first started, I posted on like one of the local social media things and said, "Hey, anybody want to participate?" Well, I had 40 people contact me that was interested. So I believe, yes, they were there for thrill seeking.
Yeah.
From that 40 people, we had, I'll say, maybe 10 come to the first investigation. And then from that, only 2 are left. So we really only retained 2 people throughout all of that.
Well, that sounds like our story.
I'm sitting here thinking, we went through the same thing. Because I know when I first came, we had a little fat spot where we had 9 or 10 investigators.
We had almost 12 at one point.
And because for whatever reason they didn't take it seriously enough to protect themselves, I think some attachments got involved and some manipulations.
For some of them, yeah.
For some of them, and then some of them weren't there for the right reasons.
But I do think a lot of them were there for...
We're down to 3.
Yeah.
Well, now 4 with Levi.
I'm not going to say for all of them, but I will say that for a large portion of them, particularly the early ones that you never met, the ones that you never met, they were there for thrill. I mean, I remember we went into this one investigation, and this guy just went, and this was before I was associated with Ghost Adventures. He went all Zach Bagans. He goes into this client's house. Now, remember, this is a church ministry. And he goes into this client's house and he starts dropping F-bombs left and right, trying to provoke.
Provocation. Yeah. That's old school Zach.
And it's
he's learned a
like,
lot
well,
since then.
this was back in old school Zach days.
Yeah, that's what I used to call him, a hot dog.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, okay, you're not coming back on another investigation. I can tell you that right now.
What the heck?
So, yeah, thrill seeking is, I think that's the biggest challenge to finding people that are in it for the right reasons. So, you talk about wanting to help people that are experiencing paranormal issues. And let's be honest, let's be clear here before we go any further. All right. Paranormal events where they get to the point where they are obvious enough that an average person could go on an investigation and experience something. When they get that bad, this does not happen because of good things going on, folks. This is because these are people that are not at rest, that are in deep despair, in extreme states of attachment, or even under the influence of negative or demonic forces. Okay, so what we consider to be hauntings are not good things, nor are they good places to be. It's very toxic energy, and it does actually, just as if you were to walk into a radiation field, like Chernobyl. If you were to go there and just hang out, eventually you'd start to get sick. Yeah. Well, this is what this is like too. The more you spend time immersed in this very dark spiritual energy, and I'm not just talking demons, I'm talking just the hauntings themselves, the more it starts to wear away at your own vitality. And that's the real danger there. And then it drops our defenses. So we have to go into these places knowing how to arm ourselves, but also knowing how to maintain vitality. So health is extremely important. And frame of mind is important too. Would you not say that, April?
I would agree, because, you can go, you take, I'm a huge Star Wars geek.
God bless you. My people.
So there's a scene in The Empire Strikes Back where Luke is learning from Yoda, and Luke picks up the dark force in the cave, right? Mm-hmm. And he's getting ready to go in there, and Luke asks Yoda, he says, "What's in there?" And Yoda says, "Only what you take with you." And I totally believe that's the same thing with the paranormal investigation. Yeah. When you go in somewhere, if you have the intent to provoke and cause drama and be disrespectful, because let's assume there is some kind of haunting, there's some kind of ghost that's stuck there, and you go into their house and you're disrespecting their space, well, yeah, they're going to get pissed off. Yeah. I don't want people coming in my house being that way.
Right.
So it's the same kind of thing. So I would agree 100% that whatever you go into an investigation with is what you're going to run into.
Yeah, and it's because the ethers are a reflective surface, right? It's a reflective material, or if you can call it material, it's just a reflective reality, I guess you could say. So you get what you put out there, and that's all the time, though. I mean, because if you're, and we've said this, if you're just a negative person, that's what your life is going to become. Mm-hmm. Negativity does define who you are.
If you think you're a victim, that's all you're ever going to be.
Yeah, victim. Yes, victim thinking is going to make you a victim. You're going to find ways to make yourself a victim. And so the paranormal is just another way in which this comes about. So sincerity, I think, is the first step. So look, all things being equal, if you're thinking about joining a paranormal investigation group or a ghost hunting group or doing this kind of stuff, getting some equipment and going out there and seeing what you can find, fine. Okay, but the first step is you need to ask yourself why. If the best you can come up with is that you just want to be entertained, you're bored, then that's probably your answer that you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Okay. Is it just if it's just about that? Okay, obviously everyone's going to be a little interested in or fascinated. I mean, even when I go on an investigation and something happens, okay, even I'll get sometimes excited if it's really profound. You even see it on the first Ghost Adventures
Because
I was
it
on.
is. I mean, when you have
Yeah.
something, a personal experience like that, it's just like,
Well,
you
it's-
get giddy. It's
My-
like, yeah, it's real.
My first investigation on Ghost Adventures, the exorcism in Erie, you'll see me when I spotted that handprint on the wall.
Yeah.
And we all know that was not there. Okay, it was not there, and it was this dry, purplish kind of handprint. It was the strangest thing, and even that gets me a little excited. I can say, well, geez, this is just fascinating. I can't say I've ever felt fear, but I can definitely say that I do definitely feel excitement when something strange happens, because it's outside of the ordinary, and our brains are wired to kind of respond to that in an exciting way. It's the same reason why roller coasters are fun, or
It's dopamine.
it is dopamine. It is. Essentially, it's a neurotransmitter reaction. So that's okay. But if that's your only reason, then you really need to rethink your priorities with this, because this is not the kind of work for you. It really isn't. And I can tell you, it will not end well if that's your motivation. I don't even like having to do investigations. Honestly, I do them out of necessity. I don't do them because I like them. It's work to me, and it is really just about trying to find out, or I should say, for me, it's mostly about narrowing it down to what it's not. All right. It's trying to find, through the process of elimination, what might be going on with a particular case. But, what I do is a little bit different than what you do, April, although I know you and Brandon are interested in joining the demonology program that this church intends to set up once it is ready to do so. And this will be a way for you to really fully realize your intent, which is to help resolve these problems in people's homes. So I'm sure you're going to be excited to have access to that.
Yeah, and you were talking about things that are outside the normal. I remember the first time that I saw what I would call like a shadow figure, and it was at the Thomas house, which was a bed and breakfast that's about 30 minutes from my house, and we actually were there over the weekend. But I saw what looked like there was like a projector up there, like a screen or whatever. And I saw something kind of like, if this is a screen, it's like its head popped down and then popped back up. And so I was like, whoa, did you see that? And of course, everybody kind of laughs at me because I don't react to stuff. And when I do, there's probably some reason for that. So I was like,
Amen.
And everybody,
Yes. I can second that. Yes.
Yeah.
yeah. So the first time that I actually saw something, it was really exciting, and and then there has been an opportunity where we were called out to assist a family where, I mean, I don't know the proper terms for it. Brandon's better at these than I am, but she was definitely having some kind of affliction by some kind of demonic type entity or energy. And at that time, that was probably 2-3 years ago, and we really didn't know what we were doing. So we called in a Native American shaman who came and helped us with that one. And then just to see like the change with her, as he did his process, which was basically he smudged the perimeter and then he smudged inside the house, and then you could see the change come over her. And I had actually seen the change when whatever it was took her over in the first place, because we were talking to her. I was trying to get her to say the Lord's Prayer.
Right.
And she got about halfway through it and she couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. Or she did it the first time and I had her do it the second time and she didn't. It's like, I mean, you could tell like the eyes, they went black.
Yeah.
Or there was definitely a change. I wouldn't say they went black, but they definitely changed. And she just kind of stared at me. And so I think I called in a couple of weeks ago about, if there's something threatening to kill me, is that my own projection?
Yeah, that was you. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So that was that weekend that we helped her. We went out on a Friday, and that thing took her over, and she came stomping out of her bedroom because I'd eventually got outside, and she come stomping out. She leaned over and kind of looked at me and was laughing in this really guttural kind of laugh and said, ha, 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 "That's funny." And then she went stomping back. And so I was like, okay, kids, let's go outside. Because there was they weren't kids. I call them kids because I'm a lot older than they are, but they were, 19 and 18.
That would raise the hair on your arms, won't it?
Do what?
That'll raise the hair on your arms, won't it? When you have
Yeah,
something
yeah.
guttural
I mean,
looking,
it really
talking to
terrified
you.
me.
Yeah.
And then that very next day is when that happened at the event that we were hosting. Is it come across kill you like 3 times? So then the next day, which was Sunday, we went back out there with the shaman and we did. I mean, he did his thing where I guess he did the exorcism, Native American style, and I mean, she changed and like she didn't remember any of the stuff that had happened during when that happened. As far as I know, everything is good.
Yeah.
With so yeah, I mean, this stuff is very real, and I think that was when I remember me and Brandon were riding together because it was a 2-hour ride for us. I remember we basically were having this conversation of, we're ready to do battle, but at the same time, I feel like we have God on our side. And that was kind of how we kind of hopped ourselves up to make sure we were okay going into this instead of going at it with fear.
Right. And that is important. I would say that's number 2. So if the first thing that a person must ask themselves is what's their motivation? If it's entertainment, then look somewhere else. There's plenty of other things to do, not this. The second thing would be, how well do you manage fear? Because fear is a weakness in this particular work. It can be a strength in certain places, in certain ways, but it can also be a great weakness and vulnerability and a liability for both you and everyone you're with when you're in these situations. So it's always, I think, important that you understand what your fear threshold is and how well you can manage it. Because look, whether you're dealing with aliens, okay, whether you're Coast to Coast AM, I love that show. It kind of inspired me to do this podcast, to be honest, because I love that show so much when Art Bell was on it, and now George Norrie, and he has sometimes regular guest hosts. And Connie Willis was on recently. I enjoy her, and she said that she's had experiences. She's had of the alien kind, and strange things that have happened in the woods and everything else. And she was talking about some of this, but she said something that is very true. Once you open up the door, once you're in the club, there's no getting back out of it.
That is absolutely true.
Okay. And it's not, in her mind, at least if I understood her correctly, I don't want to speak for her, but I think this is what she was basically saying, is that enjoy your happy lives, doing your normal things of going to work and, watching TV and going to bed at night and waking up and doing the same thing all over again, because it might seem like you want to, engage with this strange side of reality, but you can't ever have that normalcy again once you give it up. And that
I think that's why, in the Catholic understanding of the Church and the Orthodox, exorcists, every priest is in fact, one could argue as soon as they're made a deacon, they're an exorcist, really. But but every priest is certainly an exorcist by ordination. But they have to be authorized not only in general, but for every specific exorcism of a person by a bishop. And I think a large part of that is exactly what you're speaking to, which is because the bishop, as the pastor to the pastors, needs to know if they're suited to that sort of work. If they can cross the Rubicon in what you've just described, and also if they're going to be able to manage their fear.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely true.
I think that's what it's about. So at the same time, we affirm that the priesthood is sufficient for all priests, but really to do that work in a deliberate way, it requires a certain temperament as well.
It does. It really does.
Test your intestinal fortitude is important. It's just like in law enforcement. We all go through the same academy. Some people wash out. Some people are meant to be on the street and be in harm's way, and they're cool as a cucumber. And there are others that would just shut down and wet themselves. And you have to vet it out. You have to vet them out.
Riot training, right? They'd put us up with 6-foot shields, and one of the training was, you're kind of newbie, so you're there with a 6-foot shield, and then over your shoulder, come the baton rounds, right? So somebody comes and fires baton rounds over your shoulder, and as soon as the drill's over, you have to lift your mask up, and they're and for the ones that look like that, they're like, maybe this isn't for you.
It's not for you.
You're going to dispatch. Yeah.
See, I want, one of the things, I've always been a fairly sensitive person in the spiritual sense, right? Not maybe a little bit in the emotional sense too, but
I have that.
more so in the spiritual sense. And growing up, I've talked about my experiences on the show. This audience is no stranger to it. We've talked a lot about the things that I've experienced. But I will say, though, that the sheer volume of encounters was nowhere near as frequent as it is today. Since I've been doing this work, you get that psychic sensor gets weaker and weaker to the point that now it doesn't work at all anymore, and you can't filter it out. So you kind of almost like by default become a medium without trying. Like this week alone, okay? And I don't talk about these things very often, but it's relevant to this conversation. I want to get April's impression on this too. When I go to sleep, or before I go to sleep, I'll just typically lay there and rest, and kind of get my mind quiet, because my mind is always doing something. I'm always thinking of something. You can probably tell sometimes when that's happening on this show, because I'll lose my train of thought very quickly if I'm got 3 or 4 different ideas going on in my head. Some of it's not even related to doing the show. It's just like, it's a mess in here. And so I have to quiet it down at night. And so when it gets really, really, really quiet here, and I'm in the middle of the woods, so it's dead quiet. We don't have noise from the outside at all. Occasionally you'll hear some like night calling birds or something, or an owl or whatever, but that's about it. Maybe some insects. And I'll be laying down, and right before I fall asleep, my eyes are closed, I'm fully awake, but right before I fall asleep, things will whisper to me. And this week alone, it's strange. I'm getting somebody's whispering numbers at me, and I don't know what the numbers mean. But it's not lottery. I don't think it is. But anyway, and somebody came over to my ear it wasn't this week. I guess it was last week on Thursday, and whispered 4, and that was it. And I opened my eyes, and there was nothing there. And then on Saturday night, I was doing the same thing, and somebody came over and whispered to me 7, and I have no idea what, and I'll be like, okay, 4, 7, 4 of what? 7 of what? You're going to have to give me more information. And then there's nothing. Strange things like this will happen all the time. You'll see things walking in the hallways, you'll see somebody sitting in a chair, and then they're not there anymore.
Shadows out of your peripheral.
Yeah,
all the time.
All the time. It doesn't help that the church is in, that the chapel is in this house too. So, like I've always said, churches are magnets for paranormal activity. But April, speaking to this, have you noticed this in yourself, that you are getting more sensitive with every investigation that you're going on? And if so, how do you manage it?
Absolutely. And I was, as you're talking, myself, I've had some of those same kind of experiences where I'll be almost asleep and I'll hear, hey, and it's like, yeah, and there's nobody around, right? And I think that it can be rationalized away with some kind of either physiological or psychological phenomenon, the auditory version of pareidolia. But I really feel like that once you see stuff and once you recognize it and really just take down some of those walls and those defenses and start trusting that what you're seeing is really something paranormal, then you start seeing more of it.
Yeah.
So I think that, yes, you become more sensitive, but I also think that your defenses that we are built up in us since children start to come down, and we start to kind of revert back to that child, because I believe children can see stuff way better than we can.
Yeah.
I feel like that we start to kind of revert back to that. We start trusting the things that we were used to be taught not to trust.
Yes. And we're not as afraid of. I've never known, I've witnessed a lot of children throughout my life, family members, friends, whatever. And young kids, like, preschool, before, I should say, 3 and 4, maybe even 2, talking to things that are not there and describing them with vivid detail and no fear at all. Like, this is just normal life. Like, of course we all see this, don't we? And not feeling any kind of unsettledness about it at all. It's normal to them. And then that just sort of goes away. I remember this from my own youth. So unlike a lot of people, I never forgot what that was like. I remember seeing things. There was only one thing in my childhood that unsettled me. I was in the bathtub. And I used to like to play with I had boats and little like toys that could get wet, and they were probably made more so for the pool, but I wanted them all year round. This was winter, so I was in the bathtub, and I wanted my boat. So I must have been about 4 or 5, probably closer to 5, and I was just playing in the bathtub and just probably had been in there for about an hour when all of a sudden I heard something walk into the bathroom. And this was like where it was a bathtub with a shower curtain, or maybe they were even, I don't even remember. It was either a shower curtain or they were like the doors that are sort of like opaque. Translucent, where and so I couldn't see because it was behind me. The door to enter the bathroom was behind me, and there was this curtain in the way or whatever. And so I remember trying to look around it and not being able to because I didn't want to get up from my position to see who it was. And so I just went back to play with my toys, and all of a sudden I saw in the corner of my vision movement. So I looked, and there was this perfectly white, glowing hand on the other side, just waving like this. All I could see was the hand just waving. And I think I screamed or something from my mom, and she came in. I said, and she's like, what? And she thought something had happened to me. I said, there was a hand waving at me. And a hand? What are you talking about? And I remember this very, very vividly. And I remember things going back to even 2 years old of a similar nature. So yeah, kids do, I think you're exactly right. I think it's sort of bringing us back to some of that state that we naturally were in before we got it conditioned out of us by society and everything else to believe more rationally. Enlightenment wasn't necessarily great for human psychology. I mean, it was really good for, innovation, science, and research and things like that, academia. The Enlightenment period was great for that, but it really, this extreme rationalism has taken our humanity away too. And I think this is a big part of our humanity that we need to reconnect to. And I think the paranormal, if I can say something good about paranormal investigation, is I think it can reconnect us to that. But let's talk a little bit about the equipment. So my favorite one is the SLS camera. That's the one I thought was going to be the biggest load of garbage, when we bought it. And it was very expensive, by the way. But when we got that one, I was like, I hope this is going to pay for itself, because this is the most expensive thing we've got, at least at the time. And I really am having a hard time believing that this thing's going to work. And out of all of the equipment that we have ever used, we have found that to be the single most useful one.
Got some crazy evidence.
Crazy stuff with that. So, April, what are your favorite ones? And maybe talk, I don't know if you have an SLS, but maybe talk about that too.
So I actually do have an SLS, and honestly, the very best, the holy grail of paranormal evidence that we have ever caught, it was with an SLS. Uh-huh. And we were doing like an amateur investigation at the field hospital, and Brandon was helping me with that, and he was on the other side of the table. And with the SLS, I said, "There's something standing beside you." And so I told everybody to start taking pictures. Well, we got a picture of him. You can see, I had them take two. One picture is just him, and then like seconds later, there's another being right there.
Yeah,
solid. I mean, it was as solid as I would look, or you look to me.
Yeah. So
that's probably the best piece of evidence. And we've always. Not always. We have quite a bit of success with SLS. So that's one of my favorite ones. The downfall of that is it's bulky, and
It is.
mine likes to glitch out.
Oh, it glitches
So-
out
All the
ridiculously.
time. That's the first
We don't even use the recording feature on it anymore. We just put a cell phone on record in front of it so that because we know it's going to glitch out and we're going to lose the file. So at least if the cell phone's looking at it, we can at least see what happened. So that's how we use it now. So we whoever holds the SLS will hold it with the
you'll
left
see.
hand, and then the other right hand has the cell phone in front of the
We
screen.
in Reno or Lake Tahoe, where you can see the film. It's you walking through the SLS, and then I'm literally over your shoulder.
Over my
with the-
shoulder with it. We even did that on Ghost Adventures with that little boy. Remember?
Yeah, we did.
I had him like hold my cell phone.
Fontana episode.
On the
We-
Fontana.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the part that you never get to see because
Yeah,
it didn't
some
make it
good
to
stuff
the.
too. They just never used it.
They didn't use it, but. Related to this, and I normally I don't take questions from the audience until the next hour, and we are going to get to them, so don't worry. But Holly asks in the chat, are churches magnets because the spirits are looking for peace? So I can give an example on that with the SLS camera. The answer to that is yes. In my experience, this is exactly why they attract so much activity, because they sort of seem to shine as a beacon of light in the darkness of their vision. They don't see like we see. They don't think like we think. They can't process information like we process information. No brain. You don't have any of that stuff. So you have to use more instinctual level of awareness. And so the church feels like something they need to do. They don't know why, though. So they come to it hoping that somehow something's going to happen. And of course, if something does, because every mass has prayers for the dead, and this helps them move on. Well, we, a few years ago, at my previous house, again, the chapel that we were using for the live streams, and so all of the masses that we were doing were being done in this house as well, we had... I don't remember what it was, but we had to take a couple weeks off. So there were like 2 or 3 weeks where we didn't have mass. And it wasn't because I was on vacation. It might have been because I was ill. I think it might have been because I wasn't feeling well. So I'm the only one that can say mass. So if I'm not feeling well, there's no mass. So and everyone gets an automatic dispensation because of it. So, yeah, I think that's what it was. So we didn't have mass. And what we will notice is when we don't have mass, which I'm really wondering what's going to happen when we move the chapel to the other location, because when there's no more mass here, I think we're going to have problems. But we notice an uptick in activity. It's almost as if, oh my God, it starts collecting because they don't get to move on because we're not offering those prayers. I'm just going to have to constantly offer those prayers whether we have mass or not. I think that's going to be the solution. But anyway, so one day, okay, 2 or 3 weeks, no mass. I'm sitting in the living room at my old house, and Tracy's there. And it's late at night. It's like 1:30 in the morning, just about time to go to bed. But I'm just watching TV, and all of a sudden I hear a child yell, and it sounded like when you're underwater, and somebody yells underwater, and you can kind of hear it, but you can't make out what it's saying, and it seems like it's far away. Or if you hear someone outside of the water and you're underwater screaming for you, and it's like that faint sound, that's what it sounded like. Only it was a child. So we thought, oh my God, something wrong with Levi. So Tracy jumps up. He was a young kid at this point, so it's plausible something could have happened. Ran in there. He's out like a light. So it's definitely not him. And, we still had a pretty large amount of land there. So it wasn't like there could have been neighbors or anything, although I did go out to check to make sure because this was a neighborhood. It's not like how we live now. And I'm looking around. I'm saying, like, what is this child? Until I hear it again. And so I said, Tracy, it's coming from the dining room. So we went in there, and as we got close to the dining room, you could hear it, but it still would always feel like it was getting closer, but still too far away to make it out. So at this point, I called out to it. I said, is there somebody there? And then I heard a child go, yes. But it sounded like it was coming from a great distance again. So at this point, having had the experience I have now, where I can tell a paranormal event when I'm witnessing one. I knew that this was something that was abnormal. So I said let's get the SLS, let's get it out. And so I had Tracy hold it, and I went back to the dining room, and now she's holding it. And I said, "Are you still here?" Because it takes about 10 minutes to get it all set up and everything. And I didn't hear anything, but all of a sudden, she's holding it, and we're, I'm out there. Look, I'm here for you. If you need me, I'm here. All of a sudden, 2 little figures the size of children come out in the stick figure form that the SLS generates, come out of the dining room and stand right in front of me. And one jumps up on the table to the side and starts pointing up to the right above it like this. It just keeps pointing.
Crucifix.
And there was a crucifix there.
Yep.
And I said, "Oh my God!" Because Tracy's describing what it's saying, what she's seeing there on the screen, and she's saying it's pointing to the crucifix. And I said, "Oh my God, these are spirits that were looking for mass."
Yep.
And so I said, "Do you need prayers? Do you need prayers?" And then they both started pointing like crazy at the crucifix.
It looked like they were dancing.
It did.
Almost. Like,
it was crazy.
Yeah.
So I said, let me bless you. So I put on my stole, if I remember correctly, and I went over and I gave them a solemn blessing. And I kid you not, we still have this footage somewhere. Both of the stick figures bowed as I gave the blessing. And then they were gone and never had any disturbance like that again. You can't mean to tell me that is not
I remember that.
validation of the SLS.
I remember you showing me that evidence, and it gave me chills when you see them bow.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
man.
It was just too relevant. It was too specific, and it made too much sense. When we come back here, we're going to talk more with April about the paranormal and then start taking some of your questions. Don't go away.
Do you know where secrets go? 'Cause I've forgotten mine. They've slipped out of my control, and you know where they hide. Your love's a little heavy, you're touching me already, and it's working up my nerves. You should probably forget me, 'cause I'm terrified you'll get me when I'm at my worst. It's not too late to let you know that you're in love with a ghost. So pack up your bags and run. Once you see the truth, you'll be over it. And when it's all said and done, you just gotta run. I could whisper sweeter things and back to me you'd crawl. Puppeteer your love for strings, but it's not love at all. My ego's still providing, I'm not the one who's driving, but I can't find the brakes. Yeah, girl, there's no denying that even though I'm trying, I'm your next mistake. I'm falling in deep. You should take me at my word. It's not too late to let you know that you're in love with a ghost. So run. Pack up your bags and run. Once you see the truth, you'll be over it. Run. And when it's all said and done, run. You know you gotta, you know you gotta, you know you gotta run. You know you gotta just gotta run. Just gotta run.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Vestiges After Dark on Paranormal Investigation. Here, as we begin the third and final hour, 85 of you listening and watching, watching live. I don't know. I don't have the numbers of who's listening live, but 85, 86. Welcome. We are going to start taking your questions. And now you can call directly into the show by calling 802-321-0073. That's 802-321-0073. You don't even have to put in a PIN number. It's just a direct line. And you can also call for free on Skype. If you have Skype, just dial up Eye of the Seer, EYEOFTHESEER. And whether you're international or not, we can use Skype if that's a way you want to call in. We'll also be taking all your questions throughout the various platforms where we're simulcasting, as well as, predominantly on YouTube, where most of the questions are coming in. And then April and the rest of us here on the panel will do our best to try to answer them. So get them all together, get it ready, and ask away, all right? Don't go away. All right. Once again, that number to call is 802-321-0073. I'm going to put that up on the screen right now. 802-321-0073. And you can also call on Skype. Just dial Eye of the Seer, and we'll take you on. And if you, new rules, I guess, on this one, if you can't get through because it's busy or whatever, just keep trying, okay? And keep listening, on your normal platform so that you don't miss anything. But once you connect, you can listen on your phone, because it's going to be about a 20-second difference between what you're hearing on your device and what you hear when you call in. We're about 20 seconds ahead of you. So just listen on your phone and wait for me to call you on and bring you on, okay? But you'll hear the show until I'm ready to actually introduce you. So just stay on the line. If you decide to call in, we would love to hear from you. All right. April, there's already a bunch of questions for you I saw. So, Jamie, what's the first one for April?
First one I saw was from Holly. How long do you spend on an investigation, or how long do you investigate an area?
That depends on the location, because a lot of times it's you go to places and there'll be activity happening, and then a lot of times they won't. If we go to somewhere like, say, Waverly Hills or whatever, they allot us a certain amount of time. So like, say 8 p.m. to like 3 or 4 a.m. So we'll investigate throughout the night until we just get too tired and we can't stay awake any longer, or we feel like there's not really a whole lot happening. There have been times that we've been on investigations where something will come across some of our devices, basically says stop, leave, get out, that kind of thing. And when that happens, we leave. We respect that and we'll leave. So, and that's actually a good thing to bring up. You can't really trust what you see on TV when it comes to paranormal investigations, because you watch a 40-minute TV show, or I guess it's an hour if you count commercials and stuff. Those people that are doing those reality shows, they're usually there for 2 or 3 days to get what evidence that they give you. Whereas if we're at a location for, say, 5 hours, we may get 15 minutes worth of evidence, because a lot of it is literally like fishing or investigating or hunting, because you're having to move to different locations. You're trying to use different techniques or catchphrases or something like that to try to get some kind of response or interaction.
Yeah, when we do Ghost Adventures, a Ghost Adventures episode's about, it's an hour, but there's about only 43, 42 minutes of content. Yeah. And they don't usually bring us on, except on special cases, they don't usually bring us on until the last 20 or 15 minutes. And Jamie and I are there for like 6 hours. And we're working and doing things for you get to see 15, 20 minutes of that.
Yeah, you don't see much of what we actually do.
So that is very true. I think people think it's like it happens instantly, or that you can just sit there with a
you just walk in and start throwing holy water. We're good.
Yeah, or just go in with a
no, with a hell of a lot more than that.
Or just go in with like a spirit box and think that you're just going to immediately start getting a conversation going. It just doesn't work like that. I think to be the third criteria of being a paranormal investigator, if you really want to play around with this, is need to be very, very patient and be willing to be disappointed, because even if you're in an active location, it doesn't mean it's going to interact with you.
Right.
Do you ever find that to be true, where you've been on a place where one time nothing happened, and the next time you go back, it does?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what happens. And when we have people come as a guest to the field hospital that we sponsor, we'll tell them, say, well, you may or may not have activity. That's just, you know how it is in the paranormal field. They'll either talk to you or they won't.
Right.
And, it depends on if maybe the spirits don't want to be there right now, or they just, want to observe you or whatever. So, yes, I agree with you on that 100%. It's not at all like what you see on TV.
Not at all. Not at all. Father Chris, Val asks in the YouTube chat room if you've ever been involved in paranormal investigations. I mean, you're an exorcist too, so I'd imagine you've had to do a little bit of this, but maybe not to the same degree.
Oh yeah,
I don't know.
But I mean, obviously not. I mean, mine goes back well before TV shows about this, and gadgets that are made, to assist. I grew up in a family who. Well, certainly my mum's side of the family, this was just openly spoken about, like as normal. The house that they'd spent a lot of their childhood in and that my grandparents still lived in, was haunted, and everyone just told the story of seeing this guy, and various other things, and it was all credulous, if you know, like there was no, and they were quite varied people, like in terms of faith and how they interpreted these things. But I grew up with it being very normalized, and then and my sisters were fascinated by this stuff, and so I've been around it all my life,
yeah.
And I remember going in terms of investigations. Sorry, to answer the question and get to the point. Even as a child, we'd go to this like a sports club which had a bar, and it's an old barn. Like everything in England's bloody old, right? and
how can it not be haunted? I mean, the whole damn country is haunted.
Right. Anywhere you go can be haunted.
The whole continent. I mean, the whole continent. Yeah.
Yeah, bodies everywhere. But so a girl had hanged herself in like the rafters of it was basically a barn that was made into a bar. And the landlord, who again was just a dead normal, like none of this was about, I'll tell you a ghost story. It wasn't that. He's like, oh yeah, because we sensed something in there just as little kids, and oh yeah, and he just told us like straight out. I mean, these days, I think Gen X were the last ones that you could just tell things to as kids, and we'd go, oh, all right.
Yeah,
I think now they'll all be at the psychiatrist. Sorry, no offense. I sounded a bit cynical then, didn't I? Oh, I do apologize. And he'd just say, oh yeah, and he lived on the site, right? Because that's how it was. And he said, yeah, I'll go to bed at night, and I'll just say, could you turn the lights off, please? And the lights will go off. Like, and he was not, BSing us. That was just his life. And so, everywhere I've gone, I've I don't seek it. I'm not like there with my divining rods trying to, but they find me. I mean, I was live on the show from Glasgow in some random.
And you had that thing happen. I remember that behind you. Yeah.
And like the kettle turned around. Like that's what happened. That's what happened.
Yeah.
Like I just saw it move, like spin on its thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, I've forgotten to bless the place. Like that's what it was.
Yeah.
And so, but like I'm not one of these spooky people, And then obviously, in a more professional capacity. As a parish priest, many it's much more common than people realize, because people don't talk about it. Not because I say, you mustn't say anything, but because it's private stuff, right? And people don't want to be thought of as mental or irrational or. But oftentimes people, especially if you're doing baptisms and you've got people coming in from all over the place that don't normally darken the door of a church, and before you know it, you're doing a house blessing, and then so. But I don't use any gadgets or anything like that. My gadget is me. I just know, and I don't entertain it really. Like like in Glasgow, right? I thought, there's someone here with me, and I just got this strong prompt. You didn't bless this place. I bless every place I've been in. Even I'm there for one night. And that's what I did when I got off the show. And that was the end of it. And that's how I go about things. I mean, obviously with fallen angel demonic possession, it's not that straightforward.
Right.
But but the approach is the same. Like my approach is the same. I'm just like, oh yeah, okay. It's just that bullshit again. God's in charge. And so, I mean, don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean I don't prepare, but for me, all my life, I've just been encountered these things in a normal way, and they seem normal to me. And it's why, when I eventually converted to the Christian faith, because I didn't grow up in a Christian family, when I encountered the Mass, it all made sense. Mm-hmm. And that, in fact, was the most extraordinary mystical experience I've ever had. Forget about, demonic possessions and haunted houses and barns. It was the utter overwhelming conviction a movement of the Holy Spirit within me that I can't describe when I was at a Eucharist, and an absolute knowledge that Jesus Christ was on the cross and in my mouth.
Mm-hmm. It is a profound experience once you're ready to, fully process it. I don't know if a lot of people are. April,
that took years.
April, what would you? Is there anything that could happen theoretically in an investigation that would get you to stop? Like you would be like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. That was the threshold. I'm not going to cross that. Is there anything that could happen that would put you in that frame of mind? And if so, what is it?
Do you mean like stop permanently, or
yes, like something that would bother you or disturb you enough that you wouldn't ever want to do this anymore, where it would stop being interesting or fun?
I don't know that I've ever thought along those lines, but it would probably be something where someone got hurt to an extent that, was a, pretty high level. I don't even know how to answer that really.
Yeah.
It would have to be, I feel like it would be because my makeup is to help people. Even in my day job, that's what I like to do, is help people.
Right.
So it follows over into this. And, if I were to get, say, a message of some sort through some kind of means or whatever that says, you need to quit this, then I might. Like with this time when the thing was threatening me, I did stop for a couple weeks just to kind of give myself time to kind of clear my mind and make sure that, there was nothing going on with that.
Sure.
So I don't, I would say it would have to be something pretty big, because I really want to be able to help people, if that makes sense.
We had some people on the reason I asked this is because we had some people on the team also before Jamie's tenure, that they just they became so disturbed they didn't want to do it anymore. And granted, the kinds of cases that we encounter are going to be of the darker variety than typically what you might find when you're serious. Not that you don't know what you're going into. No, none of us do when we get a case, but generally speaking, we're going to see much more disturbing stuff than what would just be a typical day for a ghost hunting team. So there's that. I mean, that's something to be expected. But there were people that after they had their encounters, they never wanted to do it again. Or you could just see that they were visibly trying. They'd come back like another time, and you've seen this, and then they leave again. Consistency was always a big problem. When we start the demonology program, and oh, goodness gracious, we got a call. I didn't realize I was going to do that. I'm going to have to turn this thing off. Yeah, that was right. We have a caller. Let's go ahead and bring him on right now since that already came through that way. So hello, you're on the air. Area code 954.
Hello.
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 Hi. This is Serena. I have a question for Brian.
Yes. Go right ahead.
Brian?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay.
Hi.
So, you had mentioned when you were 5 years old and then hand was waving at you.
Uh-huh.
I was just curious, when you got older, did you end up seeing that spirit again or entity or whatever it was? And did you figure out what that was all about?
I suspect I have a theory as to what it might be, but no, I've never been able to definitively say one way or the other that it was this thing or that thing. I don't know if you heard the episode probably a season or two ago where I talked about my experiences with these luminous things in the woods that were happening around the same time that this happened, but this was after that. So I suspected that, and even to this day, I still suspect that this thing was the first attempt to reach out and communicate with me, whatever those things were, which I equate them to some kind of, I think, angelic being, although some people think they were more like aliens. So it could go either way, I guess. But in this particular case, the luminosity, it was bright, too hard, almost hurt to look at. So that's not typically a ghost. In fact, ghosts tend to be kind of dark and shadowy. In fact, that's where we get the whole thing with the shadow people. Everyone's always asking me, what's a shadow person? Well, a shadow person is just about any kind of apparition that doesn't have enough energy to produce anything more than just a silhouette. So it could be literally anything. There's no one thing. It's not like shadow person's a species or anything. But what I have noticed is that luminous things that glow or set off a tremendous amount of light, are typically of a celestial or angelic nature. So I think that's what this was, and I think what I saw in the woods was also that as well, because both of those types of beings were glowing, and it hurt to look at. It was almost so bright that you just couldn't stare at it for too long. It was like looking at, not quite like the sun, but it was almost like looking at a really bright halogen headlight. It was like almost too much to look at when the high beam's on or something like that. So I think that's what it was, but I don't know, because I did not see that again in my house, but I did several weeks or months later. I couldn't tell you exactly the exact time frame, but I know it was within the same year because I remember my age at both events. And I was about 5 when the thing started in the woods, and I was around 4 or 5 when I saw this thing in the bathtub. So yeah, I think it was the same thing, because it kind of looked like the same thing. It was a glowing humanoid type of form, and it was friendly, even though it startled me. You're a kid, you're naked in the bathtub playing with your boats. You don't expect to see a hand waving at you. You know what I mean?
I got news for you. An adult playing with their ducks in the season. I see a glowing hand come around. I'm probably going to freak out too.
There'll be some holes in your bath.
Yeah, right.
Good thing I'm in water.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, thank you so much for answering my question. I appreciate that. And yes, I do remember the episode when you had, oh my gosh, this is too much information. But when you had talked about the light beam, the angelic beam. So yeah, you did bring back my memory with that. So I appreciate you answering my question.
Oh, sure thing. Thank you.
And I think that was a really cool experience that you went through.
It was definitely not something that was normal. I mean, that is truly paranormal. It didn't have any of the markers of anything that would be considered to be normal childhood life at 5 years old, but nonetheless it happened. So yeah, thank you for calling in, and yeah, call in anytime. We love when the audience calls in. So thank you for that.
Thank you much.
Okay, and the last thing I wanted to say is I am a Ghost Adventures fan, and that's how I know all about you guys.
Great.
I've seen all the episodes. Yeah, I've seen helping the guys, and
thank you for your
wonderful.
support.
You guys are doing really good work.
Well,
yeah, no problem.
Thank you, dear.
Yeah.
Have a good night. You too.
You too. Thank you so much for calling.
Thank you.
It's always great to hear that. I mean,
absolutely.
That's why I did Ghost Adventures, honestly, because I'm not really somebody that was into necessarily wanting to be on TV or wanting to have a show. This was never my motivation. My motivation was always to get destigmatize the paranormal, destigmatize people seeking help for paranormal problems, because people are afraid. And April, I'm sure you've encountered that, because it's just like, my God, it can sometimes be hard to get people to accept going to a therapist, let alone going to see an exorcist or a priest, because they might have some kind of demonic thing going on. Or even just going to a paranormal group that can come in to maybe assess whether or not something's going on. And there's a lot of stigma involved in that. It makes people look crazy. I can't tell you how many times we get a case, and the first thing out of their intake form is, "I'm not crazy."
You're going to think I'm
crazy, but you're going to think I'm crazy. But yes, it's every case because they're afraid to be to develop a stigma from this kind of, the way it
people
looks.
People don't want to be mocked. People don't want to be mocked. It's, and that's okay. That's not pride. That's about maintaining your dignity, know? So people don't want to be mocked. And so, if you go on a show like Ghost Adventures, like you did, and actually I know that you weren't courting fame. I mean, I won't reveal too much, but I know that in some ways it was kind of annoying for you that it's like, oh gosh, now I'm on this show, so I won't say any more. But I think doing that allows people to it's a sacrificial ministry because you expose yourself, right? Like, I mean, we do it to an extent on this show too, but you expose yourself, and therefore, you know, you can become somebody that's easy to mock from a distance, because people that mock you aren't going to engage properly.
No, because they're cowards.
But the reason that you do it is because you want to encourage people who are struggling to say, I'm not going to think you're stupid.
Right.
You know, and that's true of, to be honest, every spiritual malady. You know, whether
Yes,
it's
it
just,
is.
you know, they've got a tough home life. Well, and even like today, I mean, especially in Australia, I would say even believing that Jesus Christ rose from the dead is probably in the same category as whether people believe in ghosts or not. You know, I mean, it never used to be that way, but that's how it is now.
It
and
is.
so
They might believe in ghosts
actually,
first. That might be easier
Yeah.
than to believe the Christian message.
100%. Yeah. And so, I think it's kind of, it's like the St. Paul thing, right? If I've got to be a fool for Christ, I'll be a fool.
Yeah.
April, go ahead.
You guys were talking about people, a lot of stigma. I actually someone reached out to me, I guess it was last week, and they had saw me on one of the Facebook pages or something like that. And I reached out to them and said, yes, you know, we can try to help you out. And I ended up it was a daughter who had posted for her mother. Well, she said, call my mom and talk to her. So I called the mom, and she's like super suspicious. She's like totally interrogating me. And, you know, well, I don't know if I want to do this or not. And I know my daughter believes in this kind of stuff, but I'm not sure I do. And then, so I kind of tried to calm her down a little bit. And she says, I want to research you and make sure you're legit and all these things. And of course, one of the questions she asked me is, do you charge? So, you know, people think that what we do, we charge for it, which we don't. And, you know, people think it's some kind of way to get money, you know, kind of like a, what do you call them? I can't even think right now. Like a scam.
Artists.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Con
con
artist,
artist, a scam. And
A charlatan. Yeah. I mean, we have the same problem, April, and it's worse, I think, even for us because of the international recognition that shows like Ghost Adventures have given us. Now our cases come in from anywhere. We've gotten cases from Saudi Arabia. I think that's the most exotic place. I've gotten cases from India.
You'd be brave to go there and do an exercise.
I don't think I do that one. Yeah,
I
I know.
won't let him go.
I don't know. They might like me.
Either.
I might go to Dubai. That's about as close as I think I'll get. But they probably kill me for just wearing a cross. But anyway,
you'd be okay, but you couldn't go and see a Muslim. That's when you'd be in trouble.
well, see, and that's the thing. Who else would I be out there to see?
Yeah.
You know, this was a Muslim actually that reached out for us, but the real problem that happens is that because of this international recognition, first of all, our caseload is massive. It's more than we can ever get through, and most of them are not local anymore. So obviously, local cases. We ask for a suggested $500 donation for the church's time. And part of that is because there's been many cases where we made the appointment and then they back out last minute. And now we had all these cancellations, all these other things that we delayed, even sometimes delaying mass or even canceling mass so that we can all be available, taking off of work.
For Levi when he was younger.
Yeah, when he was younger.
Trying to get everybody together and then have the client either flake out or be completely nothing. And so, and then they would ghost us after that, like no pun intended. So at this point, we just decided, well, what are we going to do about that? Well, we didn't do anything about it for a long time, and it kept happening. Now we're just like, look, a suggested $500 donation for the church's time. It doesn't mean we're not going to take the case if they can't do it, but that is kind of the expectation, and we think that's reasonable. And if somebody needs our help and can't afford to give a donation, we're still going to see them. And once we open up
I actually think that's the best way to go about ministry in general.
I think so.
You know, people value what they pay for.
Yes.
Like, you know, this is in England, National Health Service, right? So people go to see a doctor. The doctors don't run on time. People don't turn up. There's no penalty for it, right?
Yes.
If you have to pay to see a doctor in a private system, you turn up on time. You know,
it's true.
And like you say, so you kind of have a system where you go. And I don't know. I mean, I understand why the church is always reluctant to do this because obviously a payment is not a condition of a service of the church, you know. But if you have the default system being a payment, and then people say, I'm on the dole, you know, I've got no money, then you go, well, of course we're coming. Because then you know that person, that's another form of genuineness.
Yes,
you know,
that's true.
Another form of, so it's not as though, we're charging you a fee, and if you can't afford it, go away because we're a business and we're a dog and pony show. It's, the fee is a sign of the professionalism with which we're all encountering this thing, but the fee can be waived if you're poor.
Exactly.
You know,
and for us, it's not even a fee.
Yeah.
It's really just a suggested donation. And it's left at that. The real problem though is the out of area cases, because if we get a case from, let's say, Nevada, and production doesn't want it. So Ghost Adventures doesn't want to take the case. House Calls won't take it. Some of the other groups that we work with or other shows that we work with, they don't want to take it. Then at that point, it becomes that up until us having the public location, which we're now going to have another option, which is going to help things a whole lot. It's $5,000 minimum. Okay, for Jamie, Tracy, and myself to go and spend 3 days to a week out somewhere. Okay, that's how much it costs. Okay, you know, and we're not making money on it. And sometimes we can do it for less than that, and that's why we say it's a $5,000 donation retainer. We give you back minus 500. You know, but you would be surprised how. As soon as people realize that there's some type of financial expectation, how infuriated they get with us. And it's like, well, how do you expect us to come to you? How do you expect us to be able to, what you think the church just can manufacture money? Or do you think that the airlines are just going to let us fly for free? It's not because we want to charge anything. It's because we're going to get hit with this expense. Someone's got to pay for the airlines. Someone's got to pay for the rental car. Someone has to pay for the hotel. Someone has to pay for the food. Someone has to pay for the lost wages if there's someone on the team that works.
Yeah, we had a case in another state. I'm not going to mention too much about it, but it was a paranormal group that sounded legit, gave us all kinds of information, really sounded like there was something really demonic going on. I actually fronted the money so we could go, and it ended up being a nothing burger. Yeah. So I was out all that money. I had to take off of work.
Yep. Yeah, you were still working then, weren't you? Yeah, you
were. It was so there's reasons why we ask for these donations.
So it's I didn't mean to get off on that tangent, but it is important to.
It's part of the process, part of the investigation,
and because that is something that you need to find out. First of all, if your exorcist is charging you by the hour, if he's like saying, you know, it's $8.99 for a Skype, you know, particularly if it's like a. Almost like a marketing value.
Buy my
like
book on Amazon and read chapter 12.
I mean, there is a guy out there. He's well known. He's been on TV. You probably know who I'm talking about. Who has a rate for different things that he can do for you over Skype. Okay, that is truly fraudulent. Okay, that's not bogus. That is totally bogus. You cannot do these things over Skype, and you know you don't charge an $8.99 fee.
Can you imagine if something went horribly wrong?
What do you do?
And you're on Skype, and all I can do is be like, okay, it's getting out of control. We better stop. And
what can you do?
The poor people on the other end don't know what to do.
No, they don't know what to do. So this is the struggle, right? So I applaud you for not charging, but I mean, I'm guessing you're not taking cases in Saudi Arabia either, you know?
Or New York or Virginia or Washington.
Right. You pretty much stick to Tennessee.
We have in the past asked for like a donation for gas money.
Yeah.
And there was one case where we drove, I believe it was 4 hours to somewhere, and we get there the day of, and we was fixing to go to the guy's house, and he says, oh, my so-and-so had to go to the hospital. Like, really?
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. We pay for a hotel.
I feel you on that. Yep. Been there, done that.
I understand it's totally what you mean, but I guess what I was trying to get at is she was super suspicious because you guys were talking about, you know, people trying to destigmatize it, just like therapy. You know, people think that, you know, in our area, a lot of them think you're conjuring demons if you even mention paranormal at all. But she was from up north and moved here, and she was having a hard time, and she was talking about being terrified And so I just kind of gave her just a little bit of some advice to make her feel a little more secure. Basically, don't go to this place by yourself again, or make sure you got where you're at and what's around you, kind of a thing. And then she called me back, was wanting to set something up over the weekend, and then nothing. She ghosted me.
That happens all the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've just remembered that in fact I might be speaking to you right now from a location, because
Really?
we moved in. Yeah, we moved into this flat. Oh, I don't know, whenever it was, 8 weeks ago, longer than that, 3 months ago, and we just rented this place, and we've got 2 cats, and at night they're shut in this room. Okay, this is where they stay. And you can see behind me here, you can see my reflection in there.
I halfway expect your head to turn around in the mirror. I really do.
Danielle thought, who is that guy that's in this office with you all the time?
It looks like you're in a call center almost. And like you got like these guys that you worked with. And
I know. We've got to set it up better. But you can see behind me, there's a built-in wardrobe here, right? And that's a mirrored wardrobe. So
yes.
Those mirrored doors slide, and they're about 9-10 feet tall. So the 2 cats are put in here at night, okay? And in the morning, this has happened at least 6 times. In the morning, the little cat is inside the wardrobe, and the door's closed.
Oh my goodness!
You need to put
a camera up. You need to put a camera
That's
up.
what I'm going to do, because it could well be that she's a really smart cat and she's figured out how to open what are very heavy sliding mirrored doors, and she can do that. And hey, if she can do that, I'm sticking that on TikTok and making a fortune.
There you go.
So I'm quite happy that if it's her doing that, I'm doing all right. But I don't know. I think that's quite odd.
It is odd.
There was one that happened in my house that I put on YouTube. It's not on this channel. I think it's on the parent channel to this, which is the old Eye of the Seer. And this happened during Christmas time. If you're a student and you've been in the archives long enough, you'll have come across this, because we did with Sean Austin. He came on as a guest that particular class, and we analyzed the footage. But this happened at that same house with the children that I just told you about. That house was much more active than this one, thankfully. But I'm a night owl. Okay, I'm up till 3-4 in the morning typically. Tracy is a morning person. So a lot of times we're like 2 ships passing in the night, literally. And I spend a lot of time in my office. Sometimes I'll even sleep in the library downstairs, just because I don't want to bother her, and I'm up too late anyway, and she's going to be getting up in a few hours. I don't want to be bothered. So a lot of times I'll just sleep down in the library. And back at this house was the same thing, only we didn't have a library there. We just had my office. And so I went, I was sitting and watching TV or playing a game or something. I think I was playing a video game, actually. And all of a sudden I heard a large bang. Like it was like something, like a whole piece of furniture falling over upstairs. And I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? I mean, it almost sounded like someone was breaking in. But the alarm.
Did you get your gun?
I did.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I hear a weird noise. Yeah, I'm going to get my gun. So I did. I got it. And I go upstairs, loaded, ready to go, because it sounded like someone was breaking in, but the alarm wasn't going off. So I go up there, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, there's nothing out of place. So I'm investigating, looking around. Everyone's asleep. So it wasn't anybody. It wasn't Levi. It wasn't Tracy. And then I noticed it. Right on the floor by the fireplace was this stocking holder. It was a metal stocking holder. It was very, very heavy, so that you could put stockings and fill the stockings, and they can hang from the mantle of the fireplace.
Well, the
it was on the ground. Yeah. And I'm like, why is that on the ground? Like, why would that even fall? Because, it takes a lot to move it. It's a very heavy, I'd say it's several pounds. It would take a lot to move it. And so fortunately, I have security cameras in the common areas of the house. And so I went and checked the security camera. And when you go back and you look at the recording, there is like,
Yeah.
well, first of all, you go back to like an hour before this happened. It's nothing. It's still, it's quiet. There's nothing going on. And then you go back to about 2 or 3 minutes before this happened. And all of a sudden there's all these orbs just flying around. It looks like insects though. So I, at that point, didn't think there was anything of it. But it's like, this is the middle of winter. It's not common to have flying insects. And first of all, when you turn the lights on, there's no insects flying around. So why would there be all these things like going like this? It was very strange. But I wasn't really concerned with that. I was trying to figure out how did the thing fall. So then I fast forward a little bit, about another few minutes. And then all of a sudden I'm seeing, because the camera angle was looking down right in the mantle was on the side. And you can see this if we can, I can maybe show it sometime. I'll try to dig it out of the archives and we can play it on the show. But you'll see, and this is the real remarkable thing, is that the stocking holder starts rocking like this, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it does this for like 5-10 minutes. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Just keeps doing this, rocking. How is it rocking? I mean, I didn't know it this way. I'm just looking at it and I'd say, what the hell is it doing? And then all of a sudden it stops and then it goes back really slowly and then it falls. And so at this point, I wait till the morning and I go up there to try to figure out how it could be rocking. And this is when it got me. The angle at which it was rocking had to be mid-ear. Because you can't see it on the mantle. The camera angle does not allow you to see where it sits on the mantle. So it was in front of the mantle in order to be visible on the camera. And the fact that it was rocking back and forth like that, it was doing that in midair for 10 minutes. That, to this date, was the most remarkable thing I ever caught on camera.
It was like somebody picked it up and was just playing with it.
Yeah, and it was like, I think, one of those little children again, because it was a little, it was like a little
like
ginger, no, it was a nutcracker guy.
Nutcracker, it was a nutcracker.
It's a little nutcracker guy.
Yep.
And I think it attracted its attention and wanted to play with it. And I caught it playing with it. And it was the most remarkable on the security camera.
That's pretty crazy.
It was. And I mean, I can find this. I know I still have it. I know it's on YouTube. We can play it on this channel at maybe the next Open Lines, Open Topics or something when we have time to, just mess around. You should probably come back as a part of the panel, April, for the next Open Lines, Open Topics, so we can talk more about paranormal. And I can show you this because I really want you to see, and I'd like your opinion of that footage. I don't know. Have you come across that yet in the class yet? In the archive?
No, I haven't seen that yet.
I think it's quite a few. It's at least a couple years in. So if you're, depending upon where you are, you might have seen.
2019, 2018?
We were definitely working with Ghost Adventures because I sent it to Zach.
Yeah.
And
I want to say it was pre-COVID.
It was pre-COVID for sure.
It was 2018 or 2019.
It was probably. Yeah. So
it's a ways back.
A few years into the courses.
I'm probably still in the first year or so.
Okay, so yeah, you're probably gonna come across it, but you'll probably see it on this show before we come. But I'd like you to be on the panel for the next Open Lines, Open Topics, so we can kind of talk about that if you wouldn't mind. If you can make yourself available, that'd be great.
I'd be happy to.
All right, great, fantastic. Okay, so there's another question here. We kind of touched on this.
Val had one.
Val was asking, let's just do this as a clarifier. I think I already answered it, but she said, April, with all the equipment you use, what is your favorite go-to? And she says, personally, she has a fondness for dowsing rods, which respond to her. So what is your favorite? Is it the SLS or was it something else?
I'd have to say my favorite would be the dowsing rods.
Okay.
Followed by the Ovilus, which is this right here.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I really like those. And then I always have a digital recorder going or a camera just so I can record evidence. But here more recently, I've just been kind of using myself. What do I see? What do I hear? And then there's another really cool one I've got. It's called a tripwire. Let me show you. And it's like 12 feet long, and it's got these little sensors right here, and they will only pick up EMF field. So like we cross over and we don't set it off. So only a spirit can. And what I'll do a lot of times with this is I'll wrap it around somebody when we're doing the Estes method. And that way you can see if something crosses over while they're doing it. And there's been a lot of times I'll say, can you come into this room? And you'll see these lights just light up one right after the other, like something's coming to us. And you'll see them light up as they're going away. So I would say those are probably my top 3 or 4. Going to different locations, I'll try different stuff from time to time, but usually that's my go-to.
Okay. No. I have mixed feelings on the obelisk. I've gotten results with it. When it works, it really works.
Yeah.
But most of the time we find that it doesn't really ever give us anything that's coherent
it's
or relevant.
sporadic.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
I would agree with that too.
But I like the Estes method is something we haven't done, and I would like to do because I've seen it on different shows and in documentaries and stuff. And that there's really something to it.
We would like, well, I mean, look, we investigate differently than what you would see on TV or what you would see, and because we're not really looking to try to collect evidence of the paranormal, and we're not trying to like interact with these things. We're just trying to identify what's going on so that we can resolve it as quickly as possible. I always feel like if we're still there at 1 o'clock, we haven't really done a good job. Because I feel like, if we get to a client's house by 7 or 8, I feel like we should be able to resolve or at least start the process of identification before midnight. If we're still at it by 1, I start to feel like this case is either extremely complicated or a lot more involved than we were prepared for, or that, there's something that we're not doing right. But we, only for like, occasionally we will do a case when it's just a haunting. Like the clients will say, no, I'm not being attacked. It's just, I've got a lot of activity in my house. Those are the ones where we'll spend all night. And what's nice about those is that they don't come across very often, which is why you haven't seen it happen, but we'll live stream those.
Yeah.
If we can get the permission of the owner of the house to let us do it, we'll even live stream those investigations. And those are the ones we will spend well past the midnight hour, trying to see what's going on, because it can be helpful.
I think they're the easiest to resolve.
They are, because it really is just as simple as the office of the dead, or grant them rest unto them, O Lord, and let divine light shine upon them. Basic prayer is all that's necessary here. Is the prayers of the dead. It's all that's necessary. And you're right. And if we can get a name, and this is the only reason why I kind of indulge the investigation aspect of it for these kinds of haunting cases, because if I can get a name, if I can get the trust of whatever is in that house by spending time with it and interacting with it, and getting a name, then I can take those names to the altar the next day. And, oftentimes, in fact, I would say every time, we have been told that after we say that mass, it's like the problems cease for those kinds of cases.
Yeah, we've had one client call me after the fact, did not know when we were doing the mass or when we were putting their loved one's name on the altar, and they called me and said, "Hey, did you do the mass because it's gone?" And as a matter of fact, we did.
Yeah. Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. You say that. This is a simple prayer that you can memorize and utilize whenever you feel that you are in the presence of something that is not at rest. And most of the time, if you're having paranormal problems, that's what you're dealing with, is somebody that is not at rest, because people do not die well anymore. They never really did. Look, you had a short period of time in Christian history where people died fairly well, probably from about 500 to about 1700. Then they started dying poorly after that, and they died very poorly before that. So it's not like it's new to this world, but it is very important. I think it's exceptionally important. I think to not.
You could argue that in America, they've always died. Well, sorry. excluding Native Americans. Everyone there has died poorly because, I mean, by the time the Puritans went over to America, it was all finished. So,
It's true.
You know,
No, it's true. And yeah,
it doesn't surprise you when people say, "Oh, why is it always in America?" Well, that might be why.
the shamanic cultures are do a much better job. Eastern religions do a much better job. Hinduism does a much better job. There's definitely something to be said for for having an entire cultural approach to death. We don't have that in the United States at all. There's no cultural approach to death. It's all avoidance. It's just I don't want to think about it. I don't want to talk about it. Yeah.
Denial and avoidance, and then now I'm in lots of pain. Kill me now.
Yeah, kill me now. It's true. It's true. But I always thought, one of the best deaths you could have is to be cremated on the Ganges and thrown in. I mean, I think that's the most beautiful way to die. I mean, honestly, it's one of them anyway.
Viking burial.
Yeah, no, it is kind of like, that's a nice one. But I mean, it's something to be said for that because it's a breaking of attachment. I think that's what's important. We have to break our attachments, and my gosh, April, we could do this. We could talk about this. This is a tough subject for me to be quiet about because there's so much about my work that's in this subject matter. So, but thank you for being on the show, and please come back for the next Open Lines, Open Topics. Brandon will let you know what it is if you don't. I mean, it's on the Nicolaine Network. You can find it. I think it's the summer special, isn't it? Or is there another one this season? Brandon?
I think it's summer. I think it's a summer special.
Is it the summer special?
Sounds like her. I'm sorry.
Misconceptions.
Okay.
Sounds like our group's got quite a few investigations that have some interesting stories. So
yeah, well, I mean, it'd be cool to talk more about that.
Compare notes.
Yeah, compare notes and to just kind of get a better idea as to the different approaches and coming together. Next week, we're going to talk about correcting common theological misconceptions. Brandon is going to be sort of the guest for that one because he's going to talk about what he grew up with, and then we're going to sort of, Father Chris and I, set him straight. Kind of like what happens. Yeah, that's right. Single-handedly. April, thank you so much for being on, and we need to do a part 2 because there's just too much to talk about with this subject.
Thank you guys for having me. And, anytime you talk about paranormal stuff, you could talk about it forever.
Yeah, you're right.
You definitely could. We'll definitely do more. Make it a series. I know it's a popular subject too. Brandon, thank you. Father Chris, thank you. Jamie, thank you. And thanks to all of you for joining us this evening on Vestiges After Dark. We hope to see you next week for correcting theological misconceptions. But until then, I will see you out there in the ether. God bless everyone.
God bless everybody.